Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. I am Mr. Warren Hayes. Welcome. It is time to talk about pro wrestling for a couple of hours here on youtube.com/Mr. Warren Hayes. We're on your favorite podcast application. Wherever it is you're tuning in, I appreciate it. And thank you so much for your patronage. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate it. And why don't you leave a like if you're watching this on YouTube right now, or a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Those things help out. It's tremendous, and just makes me all warm and fuzzy inside. Speaking of warm and fuzzy, these topics this week, we've got a busy show. We're going over quite a few things. We're going to, of course, talk a little about. The death of Ted Turner. I'm also going to share my thoughts on the Fairway to Hell show from AEW. Lots of WWE talk as well. We talk a lot about the business stuff. We're going to talk about the restructuring of deals and whatnot. We're going to talk about the Club WWE thing and how I think that, that's bad for the online wrestling ecosystem. And we're going to poke a little fun at the John Cena Classic, at least with the details that we know. And, we got all sorts of stuff. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Let's get right to it. Before we do start chiming in on everything on the board here, you've all heard by now, but I do want to talk about it. Ted Turner passed away yesterday. He at the age of 87. I'm not quite sure what the cause of death is. I believe he was very ill, right? I don't want to speculate exactly because I'm not quite sure. I feel like he really retired from the public eye towards the end, but he was quite unfortunately passed away. But what a life this guy had. And look, it's the same thing usually that happens when there's these wrestling deaths. There are people who are going to do like outstanding eulogies for these people, like the guys on the flagship. They're going to be talking about it later tonight, actually. I'm going to try and wrap up shop so I can go listen to that. They're absolutely going to have some like a really in-depth, insightful, what's the word I'm looking for? Tribute to the man. Dave Meltzer and Tomorrow's Observer is absolutely going to have a great piece in there as well. And John Pollock, it's going to be tremendous on all those fronts. So if you want like the penultimate obituary, I'm not the guy. It's going to be those guys who are going to supply it. I'm just absolutely not the guy. But I do want to talk about him. I do want to say a few things and sort of recap maybe some of the things in regards to pro wrestling, of course, right? Because as a professional wrestling fan, especially when you're my age, you know exactly who Ted Turner is and how he was involved in pro wrestling. Of course, this was a man who was much larger than pro wrestling. Like, you could never say this guy was a wrestling promoter. He was a guy who owned a wrestling promotion. He was a guy who loved pro wrestling, but he was not a guy who you could say he was a promoter. He never got into the weeds. He never got his hands dirty into the booking or stuff like that. That wasn't his domain. He just loved pro wrestling, and he knew that his audiences on his networks love pro wrestling. Now, this is a guy who, like, culturally speaking, in the United States, is tremendous and leaves a huge footprint. You could argue that through the creation of 24-hour news television on cable, through that he effectively set in motion a series of events that still affect us to this very day and have transformed society in a crazy way, like in ways he didn't imagine, and I think in ways no one really imagined. I don't think anyone fully understood how transformative 24-hour news would be, and how it would be received by the general public as well, right? He was and of course, owned all sorts of, he owned the Atlanta Braves and all sorts of TV stations and whatnot, and like a man with extreme influence. We're talking about him being important to pro wrestling. He was important, as we're pointing out in the chat here. He was important in other ways as well, where he was, he founded Cartoon Network. Well, if he didn't found Cartoon Network, Warren would have never got Adult Swim, which was one of his most formative networks, series of shows that he ever watched. Never would have got the Aqua Teen Hunger Force or Tim and Eric Awesome Show Great Job or Squidbillies or Smiling Friends. We would have never reached this point had it not been for Ted being risky and trying stuff out. And 24 Hours of a Christmas Story, of course. Who could forget that? And he was doing a bit of research and stuff and reading up on stuff. I had known like he was environmentally conscious. He was a conservationist, but I didn't realize that this guy was responsible for practically single-handed saving the population of buffalo in the United States. I did not know that. Like he when he took over, there was like about 100 bison left in the U.S., something like that, or maybe a little more. And today the herd that he owned is has 50,000 bison across like a dozen ranches or something like that. So it's like it was he's a transformative figure culturally in the United States. And again, like Chad is pointing out, Chat, you're on fire tonight. To reduce Ted Turner to being like, a promoter, a wrestling promoter, like it's putting blinders on yourself, because the man did so much more than that. But since this is a pro wrestling stream, we're going to talk about his impact on pro wrestling, right? And and I'm just going, like I said, I'm not going to do the big obituary. I'm not the big eulogist here. Just some broad strokes here, right? When he what was it? Channel 17 that it was where he owned to begin with, right? In Atlanta, and he filled it up with sports. And then included GCW, but the old GCW, not Game Changer, but Georgia Championship Wrestling, and that became a staple of his programming. And it just so happened to be that Georgia was one of the strongest territories in the country to begin with, and so that translated really, really well onto TV. So in 1982. Things were going so well with Georgia Championship Wrestling, right? He started to push for the rename to World Championship Wrestling, because he wanted it to feel national, not regional, and develop that, the branding stuck, and eventually would become the WCW that we know. And he kept pro wrestling on TV because for him, on one hand he did like it, but the business side of him was like, I'll have people who really like this, who will tune in week after week for this. They will always be available to jump in. There will always be people week after week coming in to watch this, and I mean that's always a trick. That was always something that was tricky, and even back then. TV shows would have seasons and whatnot. So let's say the Andy Griffith show, just pulling something out of my ass here, just completely random, that you'd have a finite number of episodes that you could air during a year to get people to tune in. Whereas even back then, pro wrestling was fresh every week. There'd be something new every week. So there'd be something to attract viewers to come on every week. And I know a lot of people say that a lot of people recently, at least, have been saying that, Ted Turner is a guy who, he saved wrestling a couple of times during his tenure. And it's, you have to wonder how much he realized how much he saved professional wrestling in the United States. You have to wonder how much he did realize it, because ultimately the wrestling part of his business, I don't want to call it a vertical because they didn't use that terminology back in the day, but like wrestling as part of his business was a blip. Like that wasn't, it wasn't necessarily the biggest money makers. Christ, Sting told us last night in a promo in the middle of the ring, it wasn't the biggest money maker for him. So I don't know if he realizes really just how much him sticking his neck out for pro wrestling did good, right? Like there's a couple of instances I think that are pretty clear. The first one being, of course, the Black Saturday, right? With Vince McMahon showing up on GCW or WCW airtime. Like in 1983, Jim Barnett sold his shares, right, to a group of wrestlers. That included the Briscoe brothers, right? And in 1984, the Briscoes sold their shares to Vince McMahon. And we talked about this previously here on the podcast a while back, but without getting into the details, WWF took over the time slot on Turner Networks. You had Vince McMahon showing up on TBS, basically saying, "Hey, welcome, and moving forward, you will be seeing the superstars of the World Wrestling Federation here." And it turned out to be a clip show, and fans were not happy. Fans were really, really not happy. It was a complete tonal departure from what Georgia Championship Wrestling fans wanted. GCW fans, Georgia fans, they rejected the New York style, with all the characters and whatnot. They rejected that. They wanted their own stuff, and especially since it was considered to be more of a clip show than anything else. Well, the ratings cratered, and Vince had promised to film in Atlanta. That never happened. He never ever filmed anything in Atlanta. So Turner's response was to encourage Ole Anderson to start Championship Wrestling from Georgia, gave TV time to Bill Watts Mid-South, and both promotions immediately he hit in the ratings. So that was something that he did. So in March '85, McMahon just basically waved the white flag, and he sells the TBS time slot to Jim Crockett, and there you go. So that was Ted here stepping in and going like, yeah, no, we got to do something about this. And speaking of Crockett, like the second time that Ted Turner saved wrestling was buying Crockett away from Vince McMahon, because this was at the heights of Vince buying out all the territories and creating the WWF, and Crockett was a big territory, and so on and so forth. And Crockett had bought Mid-South from Bill Watts, and there was, he had run into issues with overexpansion, bad business practices. Basically the promotion was in a very, very bad spot. McMahon is, he's sniffing the carcass, being the fucking hyena that he is. He's starting to move in. So, essentially, had the WWF moved in or absorbed Crockett in 1988, the monopoly of WWE begins like what is it? 15 years earlier? Wait, I'm terrible at math. 15. 13 years earlier. Something like that, right? Anyway. And Turner just right out bought Jim Crockett Promotions, and then he decided to make it World Championship Wrestling. And there you go. You know, it's like, WCW had so many downs in its history, right? But it's hard to imagine. But when it did, okay, I don't want to sound negative here. It did have some downs, quite a few. They're very memorable. But when WCW hit, when it was good, it really was very good, and served as legitimate competition, and kept wrestling from becoming a monopoly back in 1988. So, otherwise we would, that means like, nothing like, not even Nitro, but even the period before that, nothing of that would have happened. No Hulk Hogan jumped, nothing, right? No competition pushing both companies through the 90s. So again, like I don't know if he fully understood what he was doing. I don't know if he realized how successful he was in keeping American pro wrestling alive, but he really, really was. And then, of course, Turner loses his power through the AOL Time Warner merger, right? And AOL Time Warner sells WCW in 2001 and sells all the assets to Vince McMahon for $2.5 million, which is still a preposterous number to this day. Just absolutely, regardless, just absolutely preposterous amount of money, right? The legacy of pro wrestling on Turner Networks was sold for $2.5 million. It's crazy. It's crazy. What Rich Craich was pointing out in his article about Ted Turner. And I was like, yeah, Rich, you are absolutely correct. You don't think about it that way oftentimes, but that's what it is, right? So, it's like, we make such a big deal out of him, but I don't even know if he realizes how significant he was to pro wrestling fans. I really don't. And he's one of the most influential figures in U.S. pro wrestling history. And again, I don't know if he fully realized that. I don't know if he realized just how much. I'll tell you one person who realized it was Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon perceived Ted Turner as his arch enemy. But Ted Turner never gave this guy really any serious thought. He really didn't care about him. And I think that pissed Vince off. I think that's something that Vince was never really able to live with properly. Because look, there's essentially one documented exchange between Ted and Vince that we know of, okay? But essentially there's one, and it all happened over the phone right after Turner bought Crockett, right? It's the famous, yeah, guess what, Vince, I'm in the wrestling business. And then Vince responding, that's nice, Ted, I'm in the sports entertainment business. That's the only moment, that's the only recorded moment that we know that there's been an exchange between the two, that we know directly Ted Turner was speaking to and about Vince McMahon. That's it. Like the whole conversation between these two men, the public on the record for the entirety of the Monday Night War, that's essentially it. Now, think about what was happening on Vince's side, right? He's pulling full page newspaper ads targeting Turner Network's stockholders, trying to discredit Ted Turner. He's doing the Billionaire Ted's Wrestling War Room series, right? Making fun of Turner, like he's senile and the huckster and the Nacho Man, all Scheme Gene. You all know what I'm talking. You've seen these things before, right? So Vince is doing this. He's sending letters, right, to Ted. And Eric Bischoff has gone on the record in the past to say that Vince was constantly writing letters to Ted, trying to embarrass him in front of Turner Broadcasting shareholders, sort of to create like internal anxiety within the company. And sometimes this is what Bischoff said. Bill Shaw would call Bischoff into his office and they'd read the letters out and have a good laugh because of how fucking sad it was. And Vince, like, on a rare appearance, late 90s, he went on the Conan O'Brien show and outright called Ted a son of a bitch, right? Saying something to the effect, well, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So all I'll say about Ted is he's a son of a bitch and I can't stand him. And Ted's response to all of this, to everything, the skits, the letters, the public call outs, his response was nothing. He never said a fucking word. He didn't go on TV. He didn't take out counter ads. He didn't hold press conferences. He didn't go to late night TV. Again, Bischoff, according to him, when Turner saw the Billionaires Ted skits, he thought they were funny and laughed at the parodies of himself because this is a man who's fucking secure about who he is. He's like, I'm one of the most powerful men in the United States. I own media. I own a media empire. I'm constructing, something lasting with CNN. Like, fuck this shit. This is funny. What is this, SNL? Oh no, this guy really hates me? Well, that's on him, right? And here's the kicker for how this really sells how little he thought or engaged with Vince McMahon. In his memoir, in Ted Turner's memoir, he focuses a lot on his business rivalries, right? And his big battles. He goes over a lot of them and he talks about his business rivals, and he talks about taking on the networks and the Time Warner merger, his fights with the establishment. Now, to be fair, WCW and the wrestling business don't get a lot of coverage through this, right? But in this book, he mentions Vince McMahon 0 times. And you fucking know that this ate at Vince. This is something that consumed him. The Max documentary series based on the book that came out like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that, didn't even mention WCW, right? That's how little mind space Ted gave to it, right? For Vince, this was, this rivalry was personal. Ted Turner was his arch nemesis. The thing that forced him to invent the Attitude Era that did everything. Like when he bought WCW, he was like, fuck you, Ted Turner, right? That was in his mind, in his heart, in the dark pit that is supposed to be his heart. Vince McMahon felt like he had finally defeated his arch nemesis, who had previously been just like torn apart. And, it wasn't even Ted's anymore. WCW at this point wasn't even Ted's to begin with. So it's like, okay, sure, Vince. So this is an asymmetric story, and that's what's crazy. There was one man who was obsessed and the other in the meantime was running an empire, and wrestling was just one brick in the castle, essentially. And nothing tortures someone like Vince McMahon more than being ignored by the person he's trying to destroy. And I think that is absolutely fantastic. I take great pleasure thinking that Vince was just made absolutely miserable with taking all of these shots and then having Eric Bischoff respond, or have Eric Bischoff come out on Nitro to challenge Vince McMahon. Because then Vince never acknowledged Eric because to him, Eric was the goon. He was subservient to Ted. And that insulted Vince even more. It's like, he's sending his patsies after me. He's sending his underlings. I want Ted. I'm not an underling to anyone. I'm the boss. I should talk boss to boss, not to one of his, goons, one of his scapegoats. I thought it was hilarious. It's like sending out the putties. And he saw Eric Bischoff as one of them. Anyway, rest in peace, Ted Turner. But look, you know what's going to happen this year, or at least next year, 2027. Ted Turner is finally going to make it into the Observer Hall of Fame. He's been on the ballot since 2019. I mean, he belongs in there. And this event is going to jostle a bunch of people. Lots of thoughts and memories are going to start flooding in, and people are going to start digging, and they're going to start doing a lot of research, and people are going to realize that, hey, you know what? This guy is significant. Is significant to the history of professional wrestling, even if professional wrestling was it even in his top 10 priorities? I don't know. But it's like Sting said in the ring on Dynamite last night during their nice little tribute that they did. He basically, Sting didn't pretend to know the billionaire Ted. He just said, well, he'd come by and see the boys and say, hey, everything that you hear about what's going on in CNN Towers and how people want to restructure things and all of that. It's like, don't worry. I've got deep pockets. It was a thing out of love. He loved pro wrestling. He loved the fans of pro wrestling. He knew that they were loyal. He understood all of this. And look, I mean, this is going to be the angle upon which I think his case for the Hall of Fame is going to lie on. Is that even though he was very, very distant and detached from the day-to-day operations of pro wrestling. Like, he is not a wrestling promoter by any way, shape, or form. He still nonetheless managed to keep American pro wrestling alive before everything went and became WWE for 20 years, essentially. So yeah, so rest in peace, Ted Turner, and go ride some bisons up with the Choir Eternal. MLA all day, nice to see you. Welcome to the chat. Do you think WWE will induct Ted into their Hall of Fame? You know what? I thought of that. I think there is a non-zero chance of that happening because Vince is no longer around. I think if Vince was still around, the chances of that happening were minus 1 million. But now I think there's a non-zero chance of that happening. But then again, look, here's the thing that you always have to keep in mind with the WWE Hall of Fame. It's just like, it's the whims of a person. And now, ostensibly it's Triple H who's picking who goes in, right? So it's whoever Trips got along with, it was the same thing with Vince. And it's also used as a bargaining tool, for contracts and whatnot. The Queen Charmel being inducted into the Hall of Fame, that was a Booker T thing. And, it's like all of these, the WWE Hall of Fame means jack shit. And I hope we're aware of that. And people say, well, it's not a real Hall of Fame because it doesn't exist if, there's no building to go visit, there's no building to go visit exhibits and stuff like that. It's not even that. It's not legitimate because it's based on the whims of one man. That's how it was always constructed. It was built off the whims of one man. And he used it as a negotiation tactic for whatever reasons with whoever he was negotiating for whatever. And whereas the Observer Hall of Fame, well, the people who go in there are all voted upon by wrestlers to begin with, former and current pro wrestlers, journalists, pundits, historians. Like, it's a vote. like the baseball Hall of Fame, like the hockey Hall of Fame. It's people who work in the business. It's journalists who follow, who have an understanding of the business, and they get the ballot and they vote people in. So you don't have a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame building, but the legitimacy there is much more significant, if you ask me. It's a much more. The credibility behind it is much higher because you're basically tapping into your main resource, which is people who are covering professional wrestling. And I think I think that has, even though there is no actual building for this Hall of Fame, I think it nonetheless holds a lot more gravitas, I guess. I think it's much more significant on that end. So frankly, I'll be very curious to see if they do let Ted Turner in or not. I'll be very, 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 very curious. My gut would be no, but this is not Vince's WWE anymore. And boy, we're going to talk about that in a second. It's not Vince's WWE anymore. So, so who cares? Who cares what happens moving forward, right? Did you all watch the Fairway to Hell show this weekend? The AEW show that they did on the SoFi virtual golf resort environment. The indoor golf game. Pretty fun show. I got to tell you. I enjoyed it. And I enjoyed the setup for the TV. If there's one thing you can't knock AEW for, is trying out different venues and seeing how they work on TV. It was really, really refreshing to see a show in this very different environment, the way it was shot, and the way things were set up. You know what I really liked from the get-go was when Jack Perry made his way in, right? And he's got like the fans lined up behind like some little parapet or, some half wall. And they're already there high-fiving him as he's walking in. I thought that was rad. I thought, hell yeah. See, that would be really fun. That would be really fun. If this became like more of a thing. I know it's really hard to do because, it's not every venue is designed like this, but they made the most of it. I thought that was really cool. And the environment was good. I felt the crowd vibes were good. I have to wonder though, how much of an interesting experience it is for a live crowd though. Because clearly the SoFi, well, it's not the SoFi Center, right? Well, look, the SoFi Golf Course, the SoFi Golf Experience. They clearly didn't want like tons of us smelly wrestling fans, like on the green, like on the, actually on the course itself. So, the people who were there were probably, maybe they were like VIP package holders and stuff like that, but they didn't want the unwashed masses around the ring. So it kind of did feel though, like the audience was far from the action. Now I know you've got the screens and whatnot, but you don't go watch a live wrestling show to then like crane your neck to look at a TV screen. You can do that from home, right? But so I wonder what the experience was for fans. Of course, when Darby and Pac started playing in the sand, the crowd went bonkers for it. That they were into, which is absolutely fine, and they should be. But I just wonder. But other than that, I will take 1,000 of these, or at least AEW trying stuff out. Maybe sometimes not as successfully, sometimes quite successfully, but I will take events like this that force promotions to think about how they present pro wrestling and try something different, because we have been presenting pro wrestling like this since Nitro #1, since WCW Nitro #1. The formula for presenting pro wrestling has essentially been the same for 30 plus years. It's nice to see different things. So I will rarely knock a promotion, a televised national promotion, for trying stuff out. Now, you can try stuff out and completely fail. I don't think this was a complete failure. I thought for TV, this was a blast. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought it was a lot of fun when Darby started walking up onto the green to, challenging Pac to come after him. I was like, okay, this is goofy. I like this. This is fun. This is fun. And the show was fun. I enjoyed the show. I thought the wrestling was great. What about Mark Davis winning the national championship? Maybe it turns out maybe Jake Doyle getting hurt might have been the best thing for Mark Davis's career, right? If you listen to the reviews, to the Dynamite reviews, and you should if you don't, that I do every week on Thursdays, I'm a huge proponent of Mark Davis. Even back in the days of Aussie Open, I was like, oh, man, yes, Kyle Fletcher's the star. Absolutely, this is the guy that has the unlimited ceiling. But Mark Davis is also, he is a guy that does things in a way that you don't see much in professional wrestling in 2026 or back then, 2020, 2022, 2023, so on and so forth. Like he was always super tight. And I'm so glad for him that, injuries, because everything was kind of sidelined when Kyle Fletcher got injured, when Aussie Open was still a thing. So then, Davis was sort of sidelined, and then Davis got hurt, and then he comes back, and then Jake Doyle gets paired up, and then Jake Doyle gets hurt, and everyone's going, fuck, And he instead, Tony's like, nah, I'm going to put you on TV, brother. I'm going to put you on TV, and you're going to work. And Jesus Christ, like he has been having a stellar year so far. Never mind the kayfabe record. He has been having a tremendous 2026. He has been so good. He's such a good pro wrestler. So I have no issues with that. No issues at all. I think Jack Perry doing the Stadium Stampede is going to be a great idea. It's a good thing to, probably wanted to take the title off for those reasons, or just probably just wanted to give it to Mark Davis too. Maybe Tony's like, hey, you know what? Let's belt up Davis. Let's belt up Mark Davis. And I think it's good. And I think it's refreshing. And I'm really interested to see how they're going to be handling this. So there we go. And yeah, I thought it was very good. So officially, is it Dunkzilla or Dangerous Mark Davis? Now that's someone who, this is the mark of someone who listens to the Warren Hayes AEW Dynamite reviews. Because for the longest time, Mark Davis has been wearing on his trunks, on his ass, his very ample ass. I don't think that's a weird thing to say. I think everyone's sort of in agreement, right? It's like a characteristic. It's like saying that person has blonde hair. Well, Mark Davis has an ample ass, okay? And on his trunks, on his ample ass, it was written dangerous for a very long time. And I was pointing that out and say, I see what you're doing, Mark. And I had his back. I was calling him Dangerous Mark Davis, not the Dunkzilla stuff. Dangerous Mark Davis. That's what I'd call him. That's what he was trying to get over. But commentary and, his chyrons and everything was always like Dunkzilla. But he's trying to get Dangerous over. And I was all for it because Dangerous Mark Davis fucking rocks. Whereas Dunkzilla is fine, But Dunkzilla Mark Davis, doesn't ring as true. Dangerous Mark Davis, though, now you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, that's a very old school name I can get behind. That fucking rocks. But now, look, during his title win at the Fairway Fairway to Hell, wasn't from hell. That would be an insult to the SoFi Recreation Center for golf. It was written Dunkzilla. So I guess Dunkzilla is the thing. I guess that's it. Probably. But we'll see. Look, maybe he'll show up on Wednesday on Dynamite and he'll have Dangerous on the trunks again, and I'll go through this whole thing one more time. That is Dangerous Mark Davis is fucking rad. And I don't know why they're not just like committing to it. I don't know what is the hang up. Are they afraid that Danny Davis is going to take offense to this and he's going to give someone a call? What the fuck? Then Davis came back again, teamed with Doyle. Doyle tears his bicep, and Davis hasn't really missed a Dynamite or Collision since Jake Doyle's injury back at Maximum Carnage in January. And he's been great. Not only has he not missed much, if anything, he's been awesome on top of it all. Visually, Fairway to Hell reminded me of old Puerto Rico footage when they're on the baseball field. That's a great, great comp. I like that. And then of course, you had the main event. You had the main event of Pac and Darby Allin. Darby Allin retaining, of course. That was just like cuckoo nuts. That was just fun. It was just fun as hell. It was just spots, right? It was just spots. This wasn't your psychology match. This wasn't, oh, look at these great pro wrestlers match. It was just like dudes doing really sick shit to each other. And it was fun. Look, it was fun. It was fun. They get into they start crossing barriers and doing all sorts of bullshit. I really want to know how many limitations that the SoFi Center for Golf Entertainment had put on them as to what they could or could not do. Because as much as I enjoyed the sand trap stuff and of course the balcony toss, I was like, wait, it seems to me there's many more possibilities you could be doing here, right? Seems to me there's so much more you could be doing than just this, Of course, they probably restricted some things, right? So I would have just liked to know, Darby asking, can I climb that pole? The person from the SoFi Center says, no, you can't. Who are you? No, you cannot climb that pole. Why would you want to climb that pole? And then Darby goes, to jump off of it. It says, no, you're not doing that. No, it's like, it was one of those things. And yeah, I mean, and then Darby getting thrown off the balcony was nuts. It was just crazy. Cause he didn't even hit all the tables. And I like how Pac was then so he jogged all the way back down, got him up onto his shoulders into a fireman's carry and got him back into the ring, and that gave enough time for Darby to regain his senses and then win. Look, the most redundant story in professional wrestling these days is Darby Allin's world title run rules, but it's also the most truthful story in professional wrestling going around these days because it does rock. It rocks. It's a great title run, and the discussion that I find, of course, because things have a tendency to grow and grow. It's like the story. Well, first, King of the North, nice to see you, buddy. Welcome to the chat, Evan. It's been a while. Nice to see you. Nice to see you, Mike McCullough, as well. Also a member of the channel. Because the discussion that I've seen, and even in my own isolated circles, is this like the greatest AEW World Championship run of all time? And I think while I think it's engaging and thrilling and a lot of fun, I don't know how great it is. Because for me, and your mileage may vary on this one, chat, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that, at least on this topic, that, my opinion is not necessarily the law. We've got a couple of others coming up where if you disagree with me, you're just flat out wrong. I'm joking, or am I? Stick around and find out. I feel like for a world championship run to be considered great, you do have to get a certain amount of high caliber, high tier opponents, right? That you do have to get some stars onto those notches, onto those victories that you notch onto the belt. And I don't think Darby has that. Of course, he beat MJF to win the title. MJF is one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling today. So that's a good scalp. But as far as others, not that the Tommaso Ciampa match stunk. It was awesome. Not that none of his other matches, the Kevin Knight matches, they were all good to great to excellent matches. Like there hasn't been a snoozer. There hasn't been any, the Brody King match, like everything was a blast, but no one really showing up where you're like, this person has a legitimate chance to win the belt. This person has a chance to defeat Darby Allin. And I think that for me, that puts a ceiling on how great, as it being one of the greatest AEW run. No, because he doesn't have the opposition to uplift it to that mark. However, it has been a blast. It has been really, really good. It has been tremendous. It has been absolutely tremendous. I wouldn't call it an all-time great run. I wouldn't call it one of the greatest. I wouldn't call it one of the greatest AEW runs of all time. But I think it's one. It is a great one nonetheless. Because it's lacking in big time opponents. That's what's missing from it. And quite frankly, if we follow the rumors and whatnot, well, we're not going to get that far either. We're not going to transition into a moment where suddenly he's like fighting Kenny Omega and John Moxley and so on and so forth. From of course, if you listen to the rumors, this could all change. Like maybe in a month from now, they'll be like, he'll have strung together a series of defenses against the top guys where I'll be like, okay, well, fuck this shit. It's probably the greatest of all time. But I don't want, the point that I'm trying to make here is I don't want to diminish what he's doing because I'm entertained. I'm thoroughly entertained. The world title picture in AEW right now is by far the most exciting and unpredictable title picture in professional wrestling, period. It's legitimately the most fun. So I don't want to diminish any of that. I guess what I'm trying to say is normalize just saying things are good. Because they don't have to be. It gets exhausting when you talk to pro wrestling fans sometimes because everything is top notch. Everything, it has to be the best. It has to be the greatest or it's nothing. It always has to be the tippy top thing or it's nothing. It's always, if it's not a 5-star match, well, then you hated the match type of thing. And we got to be able to just be reasonable and normalize saying that things are really fucking good without suddenly having to fall into hyperbole and say, well, this is one of the greatest, this is the greatest X, of all time. We don't have to do that. And like I often like to say, sometimes it does happen where people will get so invested in someone and say, they're great before, let's say, we see anything really great. A really good example of this is Billie Starkz, where she was beatified to a degree on the indies, being very young and being good for her age and whatnot, and people say, oh, she's great, and you'd look at it and say, well, she's not great, and we should be able to turn around and give like those accolades when they're deserved, because, you know, eventually if Billy Starks does like become the next Manami Toyota, what else are we going to say that hasn't already been said? You know, if that makes sense. If people keep piling on the fact that, oh, all this is great, all this is great, all this is great all the time, well, then when things truly do become great, you know, from a more objective scale, well, then it diminishes everything that happened beforehand. Then it, you know, everything feels a little more off. I don't know. I think we have to be able to just normalize having things be good, be great even, but without necessarily having to fall into the scales of this is the greatest thing of all time type of thing. And that's how I feel about the Darby run so far. Hey, Kudu, nice to see you. Welcome to the chat. It's very nice to see you. Warren Hayes, that's me. How do you feel about the discussions in some circles talking about Darby Allin being an all-time television wrestler? Yeah, I've been in those circles having those discussions. I have a tendency to agree with that statement. I think Darby, as far as a TV wrestler, is perfect. I think I think his game is close to perfect. He's got the great entrance. He does the stunts. And he's a good wrestler on top of that. You know, he's got the showmanship. Everything connects with him. I have a tendency to agree. If Darby can beat everyone in last year's Blue League, he's the GOAT. I mean, you know, sure. Sure, but he's not even getting Okada. See, Okada would have been a huge scalp, but he's not even getting Okada. We're doing the Takeshita thing. Apparently, I'm sure you've all heard by now that that Okada is not. Well, of course you've heard because they announced it on Saturday. Okada had to go back to Japan for family matters, pressing family matters. So look, from what I understand, it is a shoot, but it could be. It could also not be, you know, it could also just be like, hey, you know what? We don't want the champion losing going into a pay-per-view type of thing. There could be multiple reasons. There could be so many reasons where they might just have just decided to change course. You know, we'll see on Wednesday, but you know, it could be a work. Don't let me telling you that it's that I've heard that it's a shoot that don't let that deter you and suddenly say, oh no, Okada's absolutely not showing up. I mean, that's just, you know, it's just stuff going around. I think even Dave Meltzer reported it. Like, it's just like some, you know, apparently it's a shoot. Apparently there is something happening and Okada has to flake out for this week. So we'll get Takeshita instead. That's fine. I love Konosuke Takeshita, but again, like it's not a huge scalp for Darby. The Okada scalp would have been a lot bigger. Anyway. For the Owen on Wednesday, it might not be the best title reign of all time, but I feel in terms of packing in the most in a short title reign, it has to be the top 5. Look, it's been extremely entertaining. Don't get me wrong. It's been so much fun. I've enjoyed every moment of it. It has been spectacular. But right now, like, I find the title situation is pretty predictable right now. That's the thing. Like with them making, I know the match is not officially made, but with AEW basically making the title versus hair match, well, like, you know, that undercuts the Pac match and it undercuts the Takeshita match. Like, there's no way Darby is losing these matches, right? Moving forward, and we're heading into the pay-per-view against MJF. You know, so, you know, right now you're kind of like, well, okay, this is absolutely the path. This is what we're doing here. You'd think, unless they really do decide to do something bold. But I don't think they're going to go that bold. TK doesn't want to give him Okada's scalp. I don't know. We'll see on Wednesday. If Okada is there on Wednesday, then it was a work. Then we can start speculating as to why this didn't happen. Was it TK? Was it Okada? Was it, you know, whatever it is. Just like change of plans, change of strategy. Could be just as simple as that. But if he's not there on Wednesday, well, then, we will send our best wishes to Kazuchika Okada and his family, and hopefully that it's nothing too serious that is happening with him. Can you see Okada taking a coffin drop, though? Sure. Yes, because he took Tongaloa's chops. So, yes, I can absolutely see him taking a coffin drop. Oh, and one last thing from the Fairway to Hell. I am so excited at the idea of this 5-minute challenge by the Toronto Dominion. That fucking rules. I am so psyched for these two giant women to be like, hey, none of you can beat us under 5 minutes. And then having the timer on screen, and then having a tag team like coming up really, really close, really fucking close to the 5 minutes, and then just coming up short. It is such a good angle to run. And that is really, really awesome. That is something. That's some tag team stuff that I can get behind. Never mind the Statlander, Shida, can they get along bullshit, right? It is so good. And it's so simple and basic as far as an angle goes, but this is how you're going to get those women over. Like and the team that's going to go over 5 minutes, it's going to be huge. Like, look, we all know that the Brawling Birds have a tag team title run in them, right? But here's how before getting to them, since we're doing this angle, this is what you do. You have the Toronto Dominion girls like beat a bunch of local jabrones, right? And then guess what? You bring back Hyan and Maya World. And Hyan and Maya World, they make it past 5 minutes, but like 5 minutes and 2 seconds kind of thing, right? That's the gimmick, right? That's the gimmick. They just have to go over 5 minutes. And they can get a shot. So they do that. Crowd goes nuts, but then they get to the title match and they lose. Then Cross and Bane just destroy them. You're like, heartbreaker, and then but we're already rooting for Hyan and Maya World. This would be so easy to do. So then you set that up. You set up the idea that someone can beat the Toronto Dominion, but then they drop the ball for the tag team titles. So then you bring in the brawling Birds, and they have a fucking slugfest, and the Birds last the 5 minutes, and that's not even a problem. And then they win the titles. That's what I do. That is what I do. It is such smart booking. I think it is so cool. It is so cool that they're doing this. Just tremendous. That's a storyline I can get behind. That's an angle that speaks to Warren Hayes. It's tremendous. It's also a great idea because it highlights their strengths, which is short matches. To a degree. Because I think Megan Bayne gets shortchanged quite a bit. I still maintain that Megan Bayne is the most improved wrestler of 2025, even though no one listens to me. She has been on an upward trajectory. She is so much better than when she started her year, and she's even better now. And if you want to see her go long with a tremendous wrestler and have an incredible match, you don't have to go very far. Stardom All-Star Grand Queendom just a couple of weeks ago against Shuri, which was awesome. Fantastic. Just incredible stuff. I didn't mean they're bad. Cross and Bane look great, but their power squashes look more cooler. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, I understand and I completely agree. You have the size with both these ladies. Yes, so if you go in and you do like the squashes, like the short, destructive stuff, it just looks even more impressive because they're fucking Amazons. And it's just like, these giant women are coming in to destroy us all. So it does look more impressive on that front. I completely agree. Let's have a little fun here. Let's point and laugh here at the announcement of The John Cena Classic. Chat. John Cena has announced, an article off of postwrestling.com. John Cena has announced the creation of the John Cena Classic, a new WWE event that will introduce a new championship decided entirely by fan voting. Where was the outrage over WWE adding another championship? Where has been the outrage? Why haven't we been overwhelmed with 48 hours of there are too many titles in WWE discourse? How has that not happened? Cena revealed the concept during an in-ring segment at the Backlash Premium Live event in Tampa, Florida. The John Cena Classic will feature established main roster talent competing against performers from the NXT brand. Cena stated his intention for the showcase to become an annual tradition for the company. Aww. What a monogamous man. The event will culminate in the awarding of a new championship bearing Cena's name. In a departure from traditional professional wrestling formats. Oh God, who wrote this? Is this Neil? Good job, Neil. The event will culminate in the awarding of a new championship bearing Cena's name. In a departure from traditional professional wrestling formats, the title will be awarded based on audience votes rather than match outcomes. Yes, chat, finally, we're going to get a wrestling tournament where wins and losses will not matter. The full vision for WWE will be expressed in this tournament, in the John Cena Classic. We have been told for years now, wins and losses don't matter. Outright and with the content itself. We've had Bruce Pritchard say it on podcasts multiple times. Wins and losses don't matter. And now we're finally going to have a tournament where wins and losses will not matter. Finally, folks, finally, the WWE universe will be able to vote on entrances. Finally, they'll be able to vote on who's got the best yeets. I am flabbergasted by this. I am flabbergasted. Addressing the crowd, Cena reflected on his final professional match at a recent edition of Saturday night's main event. He expressed satisfaction that his last appearance served as a platform for emerging talent. What? Who emerged? Who emerged? Walter? Gunther? No, he's not an emerging talent. He's a well-established wrestler, has been for years. Walter emerged, like 2012? I think is when, look, be real here. He specifically highlighted NXT roster members Sol Ruca, Javon Evans, and Oba Femi. Cena praised Femi's, rapid ascent, noting the rookie's recent victory over Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. WWE has not yet announced the date or location for the inaugural John Cena Classic because they were waiting for the Owen Hart tournament to be announced first. This is funny as hell, folks. You couldn't get it's comedy. This is pure comedy. We're going to have ourselves a professional wrestling tournament, and it doesn't matter who wins or loses. And it doesn't matter because it's going to be all part of the hustle. It's going to be part of, what you're going to be voting on is going to be, people, the vibes that they give off. That's essentially it. This is essentially Paul Levesque turning to the WWE universe and saying, I don't know who you guys want me to push. I don't know what to do anymore. So you guys tell me. And then they set up this little tournament deal and it is so funny. It is so funny. John's face here on this picture, for those of you with the benefit of video, says it all. I don't understand. I have no clue how it's not a tournament. It's not a tournament. Chat's pointed it out, but it's a popularity contest. That's all it is. And you're going to throw Jey Uso in there and people are going to go, yeah, yeets. That's what this is going to be. And you know what? Here's the thing, is that and we know this from past editions of the Taboo Tuesday, for instance, if things don't go the company's way, they're just going to fudge the results. It doesn't matter. None of this matters. Like it's all going to be a big smoke and mirrors show to smoke and mirrors their performers. Like instead of, and you see, like, I don't understand why WWE makes this so fucking complicated. Chat. I don't understand. It should be as simple as, hey, we see the reactions that this guy and this gal and this guy and this gal are getting. So we are going to put them in professional wrestling matches, and they're going to win these matches. And we're going to give you reasons to support them. And that way you will get behind these people, and then we'll be able to push them, right? I don't know why they feel they have to do something like this to try and create to create new stars, and outright telling its audience it doesn't matter who wins or loses. So you're going to have more of these losers online who already have no comprehension as to what a real push is or not, are just going to go, no, it's fine. They're fine. Wins or losses don't matter. It's bonkers. When has pushing people in professional wrestling become this tortuous ordeal that we have to find different ways of doing it, when the method that has worked for practically a century at this point, that same method still works today? Have the wrestler get into a match, have them win multiple times, and the people will get behind them. That's how it works. It's how it's always worked. Having people get into matches and win the matches. Why are we pretending that it's so fucking complicated? Well, that's because one man decided that what he does is not wrestling, it's sports entertainment, pinkies out. And so the way to achieve, superstardom is through this very complex dance of entertainment and sports. I do not understand. I have no comprehension about this. Look, when I watched the clip of this, before hearing any of the news, I was like, a tournament. That's how very unlike you, WWE. That was my first reaction. I was like, hey, maybe it'll even be a round robin. Good for them, type of thing. I was like, okay. But no, wins and losses don't matter. The people vote on their favorites. Oh my fucking God. I don't know, man. I don't know. Just wanted to point and laugh at this. There's a lot of clarity that still needs to be established. And to see who the participants are and so on and so forth, right? But I don't know why they just I don't know why they just didn't have a regular tournament. But then again, they can't even commit to King of the Ring. They can't even commit to King of the Ring or to Queen of the Ring either. Can't even commit to that because somehow it's too complicated. These are legitimately, creatively bankrupt people. And listen, I don't watch this anymore for multiple reasons. But the basic reason is I've been told so many times by the company itself that what they do is not pro wrestling. So it's like, okay, fine, I won't watch it then. I won't feel compelled to watch your not pro wrestling show. It's a show about pro wrestling. It's entertainment. We make movies, pal. All right, I'll go watch my pro wrestling something else. God bless every other promotion out there that is giving me the opportunity to still be able to watch pro wrestling instead of falling victim to this fucking nonsense. Anyway, to be continued. Really feels like they're gassing up Cena to be the new Unky Paul. How do you mean? If you mean like the figurehead, the the figurehead that shows up to rile up the crowd and get people excited, yes. If you mean as in the new creative guy who makes all this decision backstage, John Cena does not want to do that. Hollywood movie star John Cena doesn't want to travel twice a week to Monday Night Raw and Friday Night SmackDown to put on a sports entertainment program. He does not want to do that. Are you ready to talk about some shitty business practices courtesy of TKO Holdings Group? There was a few reports that came out a couple of days ago in regards to WWE stars who have taken pay cuts. I'm sure you have you've seen a few of these things. Some of these news items roll by on your feeds and your haunts and whatnot. We're going to talk about this a little bit. We got a little wrap up article here, courtesy of the aggregator WrestlingNews.co. Multiple WWE wrestlers have accepted pay cuts following approaches from the company, with Brian Alvarez confirming the process is ongoing and will continue in the weeks ahead. Alvarez reported on Wrestling Observer Radio that several unnamed talents agreed to renegotiate their deals downward, while the New Day's Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods declined and subsequently requested their releases. Quote here from Alvarez: "I've been told there were several people who were asked to take pay cuts and they took them. I don't know how many, I don't know who. Obviously, the New Day was asked and they did not want to renegotiate, and so they got their release. Apparently, there were some others who did end up renegotiating, and probably as time goes on, there will be more of these. In fact, there definitely will be." Dave Meltzer provided additional context on Wrestling Observer Radio, explaining that the wrestlers being targeted are former top-level performers who are no longer being booked at the same level, and that at least one accepted a significant cut despite having a potentially lucrative AEW alternative available. Here's a good quote here. From Dave Meltzer, of course. "I know one guy in this situation. He could go to AEW and he could make a lot of money in AEW, but he did take a pretty big pay cut to stay. The reason you would be asked to renegotiate is because the contract you signed was when they perceived you as being far more valuable than they perceive you as being now. In the case of the person, it's someone who would fit in that category, and the reason was not that he's not good or not that he's not great, but that they creatively didn't take advantage of what they had, I would say is the best way of putting it. He accepted it, he didn't take the risk or whatever it is of going elsewhere. It's still a lot of money, you could say that." Sean Ross Sapp also confirmed that several wrestlers were approached about pay cuts, while Mike Johnson of PW Insider reported that a prominently promoted wrestler was asked to accept a 50% pay cut and allegedly agreed to the terms. The pay restructuring comes as WWE and TKO have reportedly reported record profits, while executive compensation has risen dramatically. According to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, TKO CEO Ari Emanuel's compensation rose 272% from $18 million to $67 million. TKO President Mark Shapiro increased 33% from $32 million to $43 million, and WWE President Nick Khan's jumped 304% from $6 million to $24 million buckaroonies. God, these are obscene amounts of money. Just completely obscene amounts of cash. So, look, as we know, like we were talking specifically about the New Day, right? About the renegotiation, because it has come out that they've renegotiated. We don't know if Tongaloa or Jeff Cobb were asked to renegotiate. We just know they got cut. So maybe it wasn't even a question of, well, this is the pay cut you guys are going to take. Maybe it's just like, you guys are done. Tongaloa, you stink. You're gone. Look, first and foremost, this is not necessarily surprising. And I don't think anyone should consider this to be shocking in any way. This has been the UFC playbook for years now, right? Where they get the stars and they cut them because the brand is worth much more than the sum of its parts. And this is something that Vince constructed knowingly. Post Attitude Era, when, Stone Cold took his ball and went home, when The Rock was like, I'm going to Hollywood, all of that. And these were mega stars, not just stars. We're talking generational mega stars for the company. Vince is like, okay, well, fuck this shit. No one will ever be bigger than WWE. And we can go back to Bret if we wanted, just a few years previous. We can even throw Bret Hart into that situation as well. So Vince focused on creating a brand that would be bigger than that would be bigger than all the wrestlers he'd be hiring. There would be no more stars to carry the company. It would be the company that would carry the stars. Why do you think that eventually he's the biggest prize you could win in WWE was the WWE Championship? Not the WWE World Championship, or nothing associated to the world anymore. The biggest prize you could get was to be the champion of WWE. That was much more significant than being than being the champion of the world. No. Being champion of WWE, that was the bigger thing. These aren't mistakes. These are not things that they threw together because they thought they were cute. That's why there's no more world champions in WWE. And that the next one is the universe. It's the universal champion. Now I know they have a world championship now. Blah, 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 blah. All right. They also have right now, they also have an undisputed championship when the championship is absolutely disputed because there's another world championship. So, right now, nothing makes sense in that company. Essentially, the thesis is the stars don't matter, the brand sells itself, and the media rights get signed regardless. So there's no reason to focus on trying to keep the stars. It's the brand that matters. They will use whoever they need to use to get the media deals, and whenever these cycles come up, it'll be with whoever's available right now. And UFC, doing this model, they've been right. Every UFC right cycle, every time, someone hands them more money than the previous cycle. And despite the fact that, like George St. Pierre leaves and, the whole lot of them, right? No matter who the stars are. And I was listening to again, the Flagship, who were talking about this. And they made the great point where, these so-called stars from UFC, once they were cut, once they were released, they went to fight elsewhere, in smaller MMA promotions, and they didn't improve their business. They didn't suddenly create an influx of interest and bigger media deals and more people watching and suddenly raise the profile of those other places. They just didn't. They just didn't. The issue here is Vince was running something that was close to him, that has always been family owned. Like he talked about that, with Ted Turner, right? That the mean old billionaire was trying to run into the ground a nice family owned business. That's what he was doing. And Vince, despite, his mountain of faults, was a guy who still worked on relationships, and he would keep in mind people who did good things for him, and that's why he would never really hold a grudge against a guy, let's say like Bret Hart, when Bret came back and they wanted to work. Well, it's like, and he wanted to work for him again. Well, he was like, okay, I'll welcome him back, and it's fine because and I'll pay him because you have been a big part of this company. You've been You've been essential for this company moving forward, and there you go. It's like that's just how Vince handled things. These guys, these UFC guys, now TKO guys, these guys are just they're corporate dudes. They're businessmen. This is what I was talking about, a while back when I would talk about, how this was a holdings group, right? Like a holding company, where their job is essentially just to create value for shareholders, just to make money, to create value for the shareholders. That's essentially their job. They don't care how they go about doing it. That's why there have been cuts, right? I hope everyone understands this. That's why there's been cuts, despite the fact that the company has recorded over $1 billion in revenue and so on and so forth. That hopefully we'll have time to talk about, because obviously I'm time is moving on and I'm chit-chatting quite a bit, but the company hasn't been hitting the astronomical highs that it hit previously years ago. Well, just a couple of years ago, when the bloodline was really flying high and Cody was in. They're like, well, we got to slim down. It's crazy to think, but it's crazy to consider that a company is making billions of dollars, money hand over fist, an obscene amount of money hand over fist, and they feel compelled to they feel compelled to get rid of some of their talent. That's just how it goes, that for these people at the very least. So, these are high-powered executives who are just they're the fundamental model of capitalists. It's essentially what it is. And just to be clear, I'm talking about, Ari Emanuel, Mark Shapiro, Nick Khan, right? These guys are in it for the money, and they don't care about WWE. They don't care about the history of pro wrestling. They don't care necessarily about the talent unless they're making the money. They just don't care. Again, I'm sorry to give you the impression that I'm taking all my cues from someone else's podcast, but Joe and Rich this week made some really excellent points. It's just their job. Currently, this is their job. If these were executives in the snack cake business, well, it would be the same attitude that they'd port there. They just wouldn't give a shit about the snack cakes. They wouldn't give about the quality of the snack cake. The idea would always be pump up as many snack cakes as possible for the biggest price and the lowest overhead. That's essentially it. Every good businessman wants to do that, but then you get into these levels here that we're seeing, these billions of dollars being transacted. That's I'm going to use the word obscene again, because these are obscene amounts of money that are being transferred between corporations. It's mind-boggling. So they don't care about any of this, just like they didn't care about the stars of UFC. They don't care about the history of MMA. They care about making the most money that they can right now. And I legitimately believe that if someone were to zoom in, just appear out of nowhere and make them an offer, they'd sell WWE in a blink tomorrow. If it was good enough, and they'll find something else then. They'll find something else to squeeze the living life out That's fine. Again, Rich made an excellent point. He encapsulated something that I've been trying to communicate when I've been talking about boardroom creative. I use that term quite a bit. I'm talking about when I talk about how poor their business decision, their creative decisions are, and how focused they are just on creating value for shareholders and opening up spots for advertisements. And I keep calling it boardroom creative over and over again. But Rich boiled this down to its pure essence. WWE is a content factory for B2B, for business to business, as a business to business product. It's just a content factory that they sell to other businesses. That's ultimately what they do. They create a wrestling show that they go and try to sell to media conglomerations, so that they'll give them money for the media rights. That's essentially it. Everything else is ancillary. It's, the fan experience, who cares? TV experience, who cares? Once it's sold, we're good. It's the guaranteed money. They have it in their pockets. It's fine. But their clients, and I'm going to go with this because it really does encapsulate everything. And I'm kicking myself to have not have thought about it earlier, but their clients, WWE's customers, are other businesses. They're it's the people it's the people they sell WWE to for media rights, and it's the people they sell advertisement space to fill up your WrestleMania watching experience. Those are their principal customers. Everything else is gravy. Everything else is just like, let's get to the site fees for the towns, the millions of dollars that they get in site fees. It's the same thing. They're selling to, it's a municipality, it's a city, it's a county, whatever, but it's still perceived that it's a business. They're selling to a targeted business. It's a content factory for them. That's all it is. Could be anything else. But it turns out it's pro wrestling in this case. So we're talking about all of this. They're making money and so on and so forth. They're still very much comfortable in bed with the Saudis, and we'll talk about the Saudis in a little bit. But, if we circle back to initially what we were talking about, I just wanted to set out this context here. If we go back to talking about the restructurings, the contract restructurings, the 50%, right? Who's getting cut here? Hey, chat's been talking about it. No, from what we understand now, with all the reports, with everything that's been stitched together, there's no tippy top guy who has been asked to restructure the contract. Okay, Cody, CM Punk, Roman, those are specifically who we're talking about. Those are the tippy top guys, and their contracts, for all intents and purposes, from what we understand, they have not been messed with. The targets are middle tier guys who probably have either high six figures or 7-figure deals, who just aren't being pushed, right? Who just are nowhere to be found. Guys whose value within the company have dropped ever since they signed their contract. And Chad has come up with, I think, a solid list of people. I think, Sami Zayn is someone that a lot of people have been speculating that was one of the first, right? The Miz, I think, is also a good one. I think Shinsuke Nakamura is a guy that people are not talking about more, because I would even go as far as to say that a guy like Shinsuke, his chances of departing the company are higher than they were a year ago. At this point, I'm not, there's been this talk, but last year we all know I don't think we don't have to dig back up the Shinsuke Nakamura, Hiroshi Tanahashi final match stuff, right? I think that's still pretty well fresh in our minds, I'd say. But these are all guys whose value has gone down. A lot of people talk about LA Knight, as in chat as well. I don't know about LA Knight. How high was his value to begin with? I'm not saying he wasn't asked to restructure, but how high was his value to begin with? I think a guy like Shinsuke was probably doing, I'd say a guy like Shinsuke is probably doing seven figures. I think LA Knight was already in 3-figure territory. Just because he had this nice little moment, where he came in and people were like, "Oh, he's like Stone Cold. He talks and he reminds us of the Attitude Era." And then he got that little push where he challenged this one time for the world title, and of course it didn't work out because you're not strapping up LA Knight as your world champion. Let's be honest here. Like, I don't know, is that a guy that gets zeroed in on? Drew McIntyre. Drew might be a guy who you get who might have got the axe, the sword, the cleave. He might have. I think that's extremely plausible. In fact, I think that's extremely plausible. I think a guy like R-Truth was probably. You know what? You want to hear something very, very nasty that I was thinking about? And again, I'm speculating. Okay, I can't put this over enough. I don't know anything. I don't talk to anyone in WWE. I have no clue what's going on over there, okay? But bear with me here. Put on your tin hats, your tinfoil hats, folks. Could you think, what about this? What if when Nick Khan called up R-Truth last year to say, "Hey, come back, pal. We love you. We miss you. How much money do you want? Here you go." How much of that was Nick Khan going in the back of his head, saying to himself, we're just gonna be cutting it off by 50% next year. We can take the hit. Do you want to bet? Do you want to bet at R-Truth that that's the situation that happened with R-Truth? Because it wouldn't be hard to believe in the context. I'm not saying it happened. Just saying it's not hard to believe. Yeah, Gargano. I would say Johnny Gargano was already like not making a lot of money. I think he probably was making, he was making more than he did in NXT for sure. But I think as opposed to a guy, let's say like, these guys, I'm trying to find a good comparison. Maybe a guy like LA Knight who maybe, no, not LA Knight. See, the point that I'm trying to make is that Gargano was probably in the lower 6 digits than the higher bracket. I think he was probably making in the lower 6 digits, and his wife probably as well. And at that point, maybe TKO is like, well, there's no point because these guys like Gargano and the pretty beautiful guys. Kit Wilson, what the fuck is his name? Anyway, all those dudes, those aren't the people that are affecting the bottom line. Those aren't the guys that we're doing huge payouts to. The guys we're doing huge payouts to are people like Shinsuke, like Sammy, like Seth Rollins, like Becky. We're talking a lot about the dudes here, but let's not forget the ladies. Becky Lynch, Charlotte, Alexa Bliss. Alexa Bliss is probably someone who has a very high, a very big contract. And if you want to talk about someone whose value has dipped significantly, Sheamus is an excellent example. Sheamus is an excellent example too. So I don't think like people necessarily like Gargano were singled out. I think it's this higher tier of people who've been around WWE for a long time and, who've renegotiated their contracts smartly and were probably doing 7 figures. But a guy like Sheamus who's bringing nothing back to the table, TKO probably looks at, we're paying this guy how much? Type of thing. Like, dude, hi Sheamus. Instead of being in 7 figures, you're going to be in the mid 6-figure range now moving forward. I wouldn't be surprised. And everyone's on the thing that's really crazy is that everyone, and again, we've talked about this before, but we can underscore it here even more precisely, specifically when it came to the cuts. These people can have these people can have all sorts of deals, for so many years, for so much money, and so on and so forth. But the reality is that all these people are on 90-day contracts. They're on 90-day rolling contracts. And at the end of every 90 day, well, there's a 90 days that start back up. And because they can be cut anytime, and then they keep getting paid for 90 days. And that's the preposterous, that's truly the preposterous thing about it, is that they can be there's no guarantee. They can be released any given moment. And then they get the 90-day non-compete where they still get money. Don't forget, like that's the thing. That's the thing that we learned specifically with what happened to Andrade, is that Andrade was still when you're in the 90-day period, you still get paid. You still get the money. Or was it Andrade, or was it the rugby guy? It was the rugby guy, right? I don't remember. It was either one of those two. But we learned through those. And it's like, okay, well, they keep getting paid. So these are 90-day rolling contracts. It's not like, that's not security, right? That's something that has changed. Rich Holland, thank you. I couldn't remember the name. The era of WWE as a stable, lifelong home is finished. It's done. You can be cut at any given moment unless you are in an extremely limited room of people that are truly the high rollers of the company. And that's their new normal. The new normal is savage. It's cutthroat. It's ruthless. No, I'm not making a John Cena joke. That's what it is. This is the new normal in WWE. These are the patterns that are going to happen moving forward. We were talking, what about a guy like Kevin Owens, right? What about a guy like Kevin Owens? Like, what's his options? What does he take as far as the 50%? Randy Orton, this is a good question, chat. Is Randy included in the elite group, in the small room that right now absolutely contains, that absolutely contains Cody, CM Punk, and Roman? Is he included in that? You want to hear a theory? Since, here talking about it here, here's my theory. The WrestleMania main event this year was a test. This was a test. They wanted to see, okay, is this Orton guy, is he worth the squeeze? Is he worth all the money that we're paying him? I think it was. Now that we see all of this play out, I wouldn't be surprised in the least. I wouldn't be surprised in the least that this was a test to see if he could pack a house and get people talking and create moments, right? Those social media moments, those clips and whatnot. And if you ask me, he absolutely failed. Like, my gut instinct is to say, no, he is not in the same room as Cody, Roman, Punk. Absolutely not. There's no way. There's no way. Is he grossly overpaid? Fuck yes, he is. He's making obscene amounts of money for his output, for what he does. So maybe he is one of these top guys who was asked. I will put my, listen, I'll go out on a limb here. I would say Logan Paul. For some reason, I couldn't think of his name. God bless my brain. Forgetting about Logan Paul. Logan Paul is probably more in that select room than Randy Orton is. I heard that Logan Paul referenced the fact that they're not going to fire me. I'm too valuable, and people thought it was in bad taste. But I think he's right. I think the TKO people see Logan Paul as a much better, as a much more significant asset to the company than Kevin Owens is, because Logan Paul exists outside of wrestling. He's a celebrity. They said it themselves, right? TKO and whatnot. They said, hey, the celebrity stuff, we love it. We're going to do more of it. That's what we want to do. That's where we're heading. No way Logan Paul got a call to restructure his deal. Like, no way. Like, they see value in this guy. And the other thing is that Logan Paul, if he's ever like wronged or he feels like he got cheated out of something, he'll leave. He doesn't give a fuck. He'll go do anything else. He'll be fine. He's not a pro wrestler. He doesn't need this. He was a millionaire before doing this. Now he's just adding more generational wealth onto the generational wealth he had already built. Scamming people, with NFTs and bullshit. All that to say, no, I don't think Randy Orton is a high value guy in the eyes of TKO. I think he's a guy who will, if he hasn't been already, he will be contacted to take a pay cut. Maybe he is the guy who took the pay cut because he's like, what am I going to do? Because that's the other thing. Like, there's a lot of these guys who are doing this, who are in the 7-figure business in the company, who are mid-carders and making 7 figures that have no real options outside of WWE. What is Randy Orton going to do in AEW? At his age, with what he does and how he wrestles, and he's not a good fit. He probably understands this, and he's not going to leave WWE and oil himself up and get himself into shape to go do a G1. Like, this is not what Randy Orton's going to do. Randy Orton knows that this is the only spot that he has, and there's a lot of these guys that are in that same type of circumstance, like a guy like Kevin Owens, like a guy like Sami Zayn, who, logically would just be able to walk through the door in AEW and have it and say, could I have a job? And they'll say, yes, absolutely. Because of all of their friends are there. All of their friends from PWG, from Ring of Honor, everyone is there. So they should be able to go in and do that. But again, do they want to do that? Do they want to start over, right? Does a guy like Kevin Owens, and well, both guys, even Sammy, do these two guys, do they want to go into a new company where work rate is king and go and have matches that they know they cannot have anymore? Try to have matches that they can't have anymore because their bodies are just broken down. They're injured. Like, Kevin Owens is fucking broken down. Sammy's been injured multiple times as well. Like, this is not prime 2010 El Generico here. And they have to start over and they have to gain this audience. They have to win this audience over. We have seen in AEW that professional wrestlers who don't meet the standard, WWE specifically professional wrestlers who don't meet the standard in AEW will be shunned, will be tossed aside, will be disregarded. Look how much of an uphill battle it's been for Adam Copeland, and still today. Mercedes figured it out, but when she came in, holy smokes, wasn't quite sure what was going on. Like, I think we have a romanticized vision of guys like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn because of the glory days, because of when they truly were a pair of the greatest professional wrestlers on planet Earth. They're not those guys anymore. And they have families. They're like, okay, well, instead of taking 6 vacations to the resort this year, we'll take 3 because I have to take a hit. I'm like, that's fine. Look at all the money we stacked up in the meantime. I mean, these are indie guys. These are indie guys who battled and scraped for their money throughout their lives. When they started making a regular paycheck and making actual money, you can rest assured that they were not stupid with it, and they squirreled a lot of it away to make sure that if they ever were fired and whatnot, that they'd have a significant nest egg. And they probably have some really smart investments and probably own a couple of businesses that we don't know about, and all this kind of stuff. Maybe they invested in crypto. Who knows? Do you understand my point? The point ultimately is that these guys, a lot of them, maybe it's just like, well, we'll take the pay cut because we got nowhere else to go. Like not everyone is just going to bounce right back up and say, okay, fuck. No one is going to be a New Day. Not everyone is going to be a New Day. Where the New Day is like, no, you know what? We're going to bet on ourselves. Fuck you. And that takes a lot of pride to do and a lot of belief in yourself and good for them, But I can't blame anyone who decides to take the pay cut and stay. And I know we like to make fun of the wrestlers these days where we go, the biggest marks are in the ring and whatnot. But, I don't think it's it's a blanket statement that applies to everyone. If you're a guy of the age of Randy Orton, of Kevin Owens, of Sami Zayn, right? If you're, you've been with WWE for the majority of your life, well, for a good part of your career, let's put it that way, and you've been making really good money, and you're banged up, you've got other considerations, your family and whatnot. Maybe you're like, yeah, I'm not going off to start off somewhere else, and that's completely fine. Now it sucks that the capitalist structure that employs them is taking advantage of that reality to squeeze them out of their earned due. But so is capitalism. So is the capitalist world. And so it goes, type of thing. I understand it doesn't mean I like it, and I really don't. I think it's really, really shitty. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that I understand the decision process. I can't blame any of the wrestlers who decide to take the 50% who are in that group, right? I think, in fact, it was pretty fucking ballsy for the New Day to do it. Kofi Kingston's been with the company for 2 decades. This is essentially all he knows at this point. He's been with the company for 2 decades. It's a pretty fucking ballsy move on his part. I respect that too. Don't get me wrong. I respect that as well. But if you're a younger guy, if you're a Braun Breaker and you were asked to take 50%, and I'm just throwing a name out there. Wouldn't you be like, no, fuck you. I'm going to do something elsewhere. Right? And all of this situation too at the same time makes me think about why Chris Jericho finally ended up going back to AEW, because he probably got into all these negotiations and he was like, what the fuck, man? I'm Chris Jericho. And TKO was like, okay, this is what we're going to pay you, Chris Jericho. It's fine. Yeah, essentially that's it. That pretty much sums up my thoughts on that front, which leads us to, if we go back to the speculation of the tippy top of one of the top guys, the report that one of the top guys did indeed take the 50% pay cut. A lot of people are speculating it was Roman Reigns, right? Because he cut a promo at WrestleMania, saying, after his win, I'm going to be here all summer. Got a huge reaction from the crowd. Everyone was into it. They're like, oh, he's no longer a part-timer. He's going to come back and, grind for the company. And then WWE advertises his dates. He's going to Europe. He's all over the place. He's doing all sorts of dates. And then all of a sudden, all those dates get pulled around all this discussion about, talent restructuring of contracts. And then suddenly people are like, oh, fuck, it's Roman, isn't it? It's Roman Reigns, isn't it? It's Roman Reigns who's taking the 50%. They actually decided to pull the wool under Roman Reigns' feet. Pull the rug? That's more like it, right? Because you pull the wool over your eyes and you pull the rug. There you go. Good job, Warren. But it turns out that it's not that, right? It turns out that it's not Roman who took the 50% cut. We don't know who it was, which is why everyone is still speculating, wondering, is it Seth Rollins? That's why everyone is speculating who this top guy could be. But we did learn, right, about this room of 3 guys, Cody, Punk, and Roman that are clearly right now they're untouchable. But all the dates got pulled, right? All of his dates got pulled. Roman scrubbed from advertising, and PW Insider got, isn't it curious? Mike Johnson from PW Insider got a little message in his inbox from WWE with an explanation saying it's a clerical error, right? And did Mike Johnson write back to say, clerical error? That's very strange because Roman Reigns cut a promo at WrestleMania saying that he was going to be here all summer, and you guys already put out the dates saying that he was going to be all over the place. That seems like a little more significant than just a clerical error. Do you think he wrote back asking that question? No, of course not, because Mike Johnson is very, very comfortable being a WWE mouthpiece. He's completely fine with it. And, he's built a reputation off of regurgitating WWE PR with little to no editorializing on his end, without any pushback, without any calls for confirmation and whatnot. That's essentially it. So no big shocker here that, it's a clerical error was sent over to the good hand, Mike Johnson. Now, the clerical error stuff, I hope everyone here with a functioning brain, and I think you do have a functioning brain if you're here because you are the A+ audience to this D-List podcast. It's dog shit. it's a dog shit answer or response because, like we said, Roman said it himself at Mania. He was advertised. They had created posters and whatnot. That's not what a clerical error is. A clerical error is my pharmacist giving me half the amount of pills I need to keep my heart beating, and then me giving them a call back and saying, hey, you gave me half of what I'm supposed to take. Are you people trying to fucking kill me? And they say, oh, no, clerical error will fix it. And then they send me. That's a clerical error. But having your top guy come out, take a microphone and say, I'm going to be here all summer, and then create advertising with him to sell tickets, that's not clerical. Those are very clear marketing decisions that Roman was okay with, that Roman was aware of, because he said it himself. I'm going to be here all summer. That's not what a clerical error is. So it's bullshit. Someone is full of shit in this circumstance. And I don't think it's Roman. Something happened for sure between, Roman cutting that promo and WWE putting out all that advertising and then circling back to, turns out he's not going to be there and getting removed. Something happened. Couldn't tell you what, but I don't think it's the 50% pay cut. Because that's what a lot of people were speculating. I even made a joke about it. On Blue Sky, where, where people were talking about the deal restructuring, I should say. Everyone was talking about the deal restructurings, and then I quote tweeted Roman, who was off the advertising, and I wrote something to the effect of, restructure my contract, restructure the dates, right? And that's what everyone was kind of assuming. I thought it was just funny, but that's kind of what everyone was assuming. It was like, oh, Roman took the pay cut, so he's like, well, fuck you. I'm going to work less. I'm going to work 50% less if you're taking away 50% of my money. But Dave Meltzer said straight up, none of the true top guys of the company have been asked. So that's not what happened. I think there's still an interesting mystery as to why Roman was pulled from the summer cards. I think that's a plausible scenario, right? But something here happened. Something absolutely happened. But then it got me thinking, folks, what if Roman Reigns left WWE? What if he just tomorrow just disappeared? No longer there. How much would that change WWE's income? How big of a hit would it be? Because I'm not sure it would be that big of a deal. And I know it sounds wild to say, but I don't think it would be that big of a deal. Because I kind of think TKO is right when they establish the fact that the brand is bigger than the sum of its talent. Like in UFC, we can fire all the top fighters. People are still going to buy the shows. They're still going to buy tickets. They're still going to buy it on pay-per-view. Is Roman Reigns leaving? Is he going to be... Would Roman Reigns leaving be that big of a blow to WWE? I'm not sure. I am really not sure. Not anymore. 3 years ago, yeah, he really would have. That would have been a sink or swim moment for WWE. Well, maybe not sink or swim, but it would have been you're extracting a bunch of teeth from the mouth. What about Cody? What if Cody left? That'd be a big deal for WWE. What about CM Punk? I'm asking this like I don't necessarily have an answer. I'm not trying to bait you into thinking the obvious answer is, well, yes, it'd change something. And then I come with this enlightened response like, no, you are wrong. It would change nothing. And here are my 10 specific bullet points as to why you peons. Like, I don't have anything like that. I'm legitimate. Like, it's a legitimate question that I have. Who does draw in WWE? Now, we saw night 1 versus night 2 for WrestleMania. And I think it's safe to say that CM Punk versus Roman Reigns captivated WWE fans' imagination much more than night 1, but by 5,000 tickets, like one night 50,000, the other one 55,000. Isn't that what it was? Something to that effect. I'm sure Mr. Antox who's in the chat will course correct. He will jump right back into the chat and say, no, Warren, it's this. But isn't the difference like 5,000 tickets? That's not all that substantive when you're running on these levels, when you're putting in 50,000 people into a stadium, when you're running a weekend and you're drawing 100,000 people plus to your event. Like are Cody and Randy Orton really like that much of a draw disaster? Or is it the card? Is it the up and down? Is it the whole thing, the whole way through? Is it the ensemble cast of night 1 that didn't do it for you? Did the ensemble cast of night 2 get your blood pumping? You get the big main event, you get the Roman and CM Punk, and then on the lower levels where you're going to get Obafemi, you're going to get Brock Lesnar. Oh, that's a little more tantalizing. Then you're like, oh shit, this night 2 actually rules a little more. Just a little more. Are any of these people individually, are they truly draws? And I don't know. I don't have the answer for you. I think Cody was a draw. I don't think he is anymore. But Cody was absolutely a draw. Is the idea of the brand being bigger than the sum of its talent true? I think TKO might be right about that. So ultimately, like the question as to whether or not Roman is going to be around or whatnot is like, I cannot help but wonder if this has any impact at all. If it's not just another thing for people online, for wrestling fans online to argue about, or if it really will have or some kind of significant impact. My gut, which has a pretty good track record of being right, tells me it wouldn't change much. I don't think it'd change much. I don't even think Roman Reigns, even at the height of his powers, was that much of a game, was a game changer to begin with. I think this company started to draw money when 2 things happened. When Sami Zayn was included to the bloodline and Cody Rhodes showed up. I think those were your money makers. That's what drove the company financially and successfully for 2 to 3 years, easily. I don't think Roman is that big of a contribution. I don't think Roman is that big of a contributor. I don't think Cody anymore is that big of a contributor. I don't think Cody is necessarily a draw anymore, by no fault of his own. Shitty creative can tank a guy. We know this. And frankly, dudes and dudettes and non-binary folks as well. I don't think CM Punk is that much of a draw either. Am I nuts? Am I losing it? Am I finally going crazy? It's such a weird sequence of things to say, but I can't help but feel them. I'm just asking. I don't know. I mean, it's like the same thing. Like, and look, it's not. I'm not trying to be smart, and make this. And you know, if you wanted to, counteract me into, well, who's a draw in AEW? And I don't know. I'll answer you the same things. Like, I don't know. I don't know. The closest answer I could give you is MJF. I think MJF is the only guy who I consistently see with very clear data that when he's on top, business improves. Is John Moxley a draw? Is Hangman a draw? Is Kenny a draw? I don't know. I just don't know. But then, you go overseas and you cross the Pacific. You go take a look at women's wrestling. You take a look at Joshi and you're like, Saya Kamatani's a draw. And I say that blindly and with confidence. Saya Kamatani, absolutely a draw. But we can go to another promotion. We can go to New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then we can go, oh, is Yota Tsuji a draw? What about Shota Umino? Like, who are draws? Look at Pro Wrestling Noah. We talked about it at the start of the stream. Tetsuya Naito showed up. They didn't sell over. They didn't oversell any tickets. They didn't do any massive business. And this is Tetsuya Naito. Is Tetsuya Naito a draw? 2026 Tetsuya Naito. We can question. He has been a legitimate draw in the past. But in 2026, I'm casting a wide net here. Back to WWE. I don't know. Like, even if Roman Reigns took the 50%, right? Even if he took the 50%, or didn't want to, or whatever, and he ends up doing less dates, I don't think this has an impact, man. Roman this summer, he might just be, it seems like he's going to be on vacation. Your WWE World Champion, is that the one he got? He got the consolation prize, right? He's going to be on vacation this summer. He's going to be kicking back and taking it easy, apparently. Part-timer, going to do whatever he's going to keep doing. And the big return pops that he always get, at some point, those are diminishing returns. At some point, people are going to be like, this fucker again type of thing, right? So, he's not, at the very least, he's not working the month of June. Whatever's going to happen post-Backlash, WWE Backlash, WrestleMania Backlash. Remember when Vince did that? Anyway, suffice to say, he didn't take the 50%. We talked about the 50%ers who probably would be in this category and whatnot. I think we've covered everything from this, from this angle here. I think we've covered pretty much everything. Brandon Thurston at it again. He's been digging up some really big stuff recently. Some really, really interesting stuff on top of that. AEW is suing Triller TV for nearly $5 million in overdue payments. We got this article here on Post Wrestling. We're not going to read the whole of the article because it's fairly long, but we're going to touch on some things, but at least read the article to get the context here. AEW has filed a lawsuit against the Triller. Look at me. AEW has filed a lawsuit against Triller TV and its parent company, Triller Group Inc., alleging the streaming platform owes Tony Khan's wrestling company just under $5 million in unpaid revenue from AEW pay-per-view sales and from proceeds from the now discontinued AEW Plus subscription service. AEW's lawsuit was filed on April 29 in Duval County Court in Florida. The legal complaint alleges Triller TV's parent company used AEW-derived revenues to fund other businesses, including a social media platform that never took off. What? Rather than paying AEW what was owed, I should say. Here's the quote in that regard here. Triller Group Inc.'s strategy of robbing revenues. This is from the filing, by the way. This is lawyers writing this out. Triller Group's Inc.'s strategy of robbing revenues generated by Triller TV's distribution of AEW content to cover other of defendants' operating expenses, much of which was spent on the social media platform Endeavor, negatively impact its relationship with and payments owed to AEW. AEW's attorneys wrote in the lawsuit. That's crazy. I'm sorry to sound like a basic ass YouTuber, but it is. That's crazy. There's no other way to put it. Yeah, it's nuts because essentially what the lawsuit is claiming is a bunch of stuff, including breach of contract, unjust enrichment, and tortious interference, which is, you know, that's for the parent company, right? The robbing stuff is crazy, right? And for this social media platform, I had never heard that Triller wanted to do this. I'm really taken aback. And AEW says it sent written demand letters in January and March 2025, and Triller paid only a fraction of what was owed on March 1st, 2025. One of the things that we've learned in the lawsuit is is the revenue split, which is very, very interesting because we never, we're not very, we're not privy to that type of information, right? But what we did get here, thanks to the lawsuit, is for domestic pay-per-view sales, AEW gets 75% of the net revenue and Triller 25%. And this this was an agreement that was set all the way back in 2019. International pay-per-views, AEW gets 65%, Triller 35%. And that also was in mid 2019. That's a more, I think that's a more common split, the 65-35. 75-25, man. That's that's what you do when you hold all the cards. When you're AEW and you're holding all the cards, that's what you go for. Get the 75%, brother. Pre-2019, so the earliest of AEW's pay-per-views was a straight 50-50 split. The AEW Plus subscription was a 60-40 split, 60 of course going to AEW. I didn't realize it would be that high. That's pretty high. As far as Triller's cut, 60-40, that's I find that's a lot. So that's really honestly, that's super interesting data to have picked up here. And it, we had found out during an SEC filing not that long ago that AEW content drove 24% of all of Triller Group revenue in 2024. That's also nuts. Yeah, when you consider all of this, AEW represented a quarter of your business, of your overall revenue. AEW, one company, one client, one customer was responsible for a quarter of the revenue. And then you still couldn't end up paying it. That's crazy. That is extreme mismanagement. But here's the surprise. We're all talking about, oh, this is very interesting. This is all very interesting. Interesting information that we're gleaning here, Warren. Yes, I agree. Yes, quite. Yes. However, there's a twist to all of this because Brandon found out through this filing that a few weeks before AEW filed the suit, Flips Media, which is the company that is behind Triller TV, sued Triller Group, right? What did they call it again? Triller Group Inc. And it owns its own separate lawsuit in Delaware. So Flips declared insolvency in the filing, says that it declared insolvency, says Triller TV has been abandoned by the Triller Group, and says it can't even file for bankruptcy because it lacks a board of directors. It's asking the court to declare its officers as the de facto board so it can consider filing for bankruptcy. Now that, boys and girls and everyone in between, is a fucking twist. Triller TV, the operation in this as a property belonging to Triller Group Incorporated, was just left to themselves. Was just like, just go off and do your thing. You guys are a money sink. We don't want anything to do with. That is nuts. It's nuts. And it also explains at the same time why Triller hadn't gone bankrupt yet, like Triller TV. Because, chat, how many times over the past months, easily a year, maybe even 18 months, have we occasionally checked in with Triller TV and looked at the stock price? Like, what the fuck is going on? These people are toast. They're done. You know, not that long ago, we were talking about the Orange Crush guy, right? The guy who's going to be behind the produce promotion. He was thinking about buying Triller TV, and we were looking at the stock price again, and I was like, he's going to get this shit for peanuts. And we were all wondering, how come this company's still alive? Why is this company still operating? Yes, it's been unlisted from the NASDAQ or whatever, but it's, what the hell is going on? Why haven't they shut this down? Why is it not bankrupt yet? I was sitting here speculating with a lot of you going, well, maybe there's, desperately scrounging for some kind of funding. We were saying they're going to unload this onto someone, like, the Orange Crush guy. It's like, there's so much stuff that we sat around scratching our head that didn't make sense as to why Triller TV was still around. This is why. Because the parent company didn't give a fuck, and the Triller TV company is maintaining a service that is not making money, and they are unable to pay their suppliers with their partners, the content providers. They're unable to pay them. At least they're unable to pay their major client. Look, if they can't pay their top customer that is responsible for 25% of their revenue. I'm assuming that it's their top customer, right? If they represent a quarter of the fucking revenue, I think in any company be like, yeah, this is our top. If they can't pay their top or one of their top customers what they're owed, I can only imagine how all of the other indies that are striking deals and CMLL broadcasting on Fight and on Triller and all that. I don't know how these people are getting paid. If AEW, a top customer, a top client for Triller TV, ain't getting paid. So the Triller TV people are just like, they're spinning their wheels trying to keep this thing afloat when none of it is making money, and they want to get this done. They want to put the key in the door. They want to throw Triller TV to the curb. They're done. And here's a guy that this also came out with Brandon's research, Adam Bigwood, who was the chief content officer for Triller TV. And he's the guy who would do a lot of media. A lot of people in media knew the dude. He was very front-facing. He's been gone since April 30th. No one knew. And no one knew. The guy who's going around striking the deals with all of these, organizations and wrestling promotions and whatever the fuck else that they broadcast on Triller, he's just gone. And no one knew. That's crazy. Because despite the insolvency, Triller TV's site still lists upcoming live events. The platform is still alive. They want it to go dark. The Konstantin Jordanov, the CEO, and the president, CEO Eric Winter, they want this thing to just shut down, but the Triller Group don't want. So, as a lot of us suspected, this is why AEW launched My AEW, because they were like, look, we are going to need to get our pay-per-views still out there internationally for our international markets. So we're just going to do it ourselves. Because look, for whatever reason, it didn't work out with HBO Max, but HBO Max is not available everywhere either. They're just like, we're going to do our little streaming service. It'll be available to everyone outside of North America. There we go. And that's what we suspected. That's what we suspected, Chad. We saw this coming. We knew something was up. We knew something was wrong at Triller TV for AEW to go off and do their own streaming platform for their international pay-per-views. Yes, there's other content. Yes, you can watch Dynamite Live, but it was for the pay-per-views, right? That was what it was for. And then you turn around. Next thing you know, Triller is canceling all of its upcoming AEW pay-per-views, and it's terminating AEW Plus. And then the filing. We saw this coming. Chat. We knew something was up. Look, I don't know exactly what to add here. Stock, as of, earlier today, I checked, was about at 25 cents, market cap of 50 million for Triller TV. Like, someone can get this for fucking peanuts if they really wanted to. Look, I saw a lot of people, go, well, why didn't Tony Khan just go ahead and purchase it, right? Can you imagine how much debt this company is in? And then the debt transfers to the new owner? Tony Khan doesn't want that. Tony's better off, because, look, and I understand, right? There were a lot of people who were like, listen, Tony could pick up Triller TV and then, get all sorts of deals with indies and whatnot, and it'd be so much better and be so much more positive. And well, sure. Then again, like it's not Tony's responsibility. His responsibility is to AEW and to Ring of Honor, because he owns those, right? And as much as Tony Khan loves professional wrestling, he hasn't undertaken a mandate to protect professional wrestling and give it all sorts of openings and venues and whatnot. Like, there's a lot of operational costs that go to operating this kind of thing. If anything, if he really wanted to start broadcasting, cut a deal with West Coast Pro, with New Texas, with Action Wrestling or whatever, he could cut a deal with them and broadcast them on My AEW. And just it's also the home for great indie promotions as well. I completely understand Tony Khan not wanting to dip his toes into Triller TV. That sounds absolutely awful. Sounds absolutely awful. Anyway, you should go read this article. This article from the Brandon Thurston over on Post Wrestling to get all of the nitty gritty details. I just talked about the big revelations, the stuff that really did stand out. But there's, if you want to get really into the nuts and bolts in it, Brandon wrote, of course, a tremendous article, because he's just about the only guy who's reporting real news these days as far as pro wrestling goes. So it's a good time to support Post Wrestling and WrestleNomics, I'll tell you what. I want to talk about this article here, published on WrestleNomics by Brandon Thurston. WWE Raw and SmackDown 2019-2024 media rights contracts with NBC, Universal, and Fox. Excuse me? That's right. Brandon's got them. What did he do? Did he grease some palms? Did he go meet some people with brown envelopes in a dark parking lot, underground parking lot late at night? No. Brendan explains here in his article, through the WWE merger shareholder lawsuit in Delaware's Court of Chancery, sounds so fancy, WWE's deals with NBC Universal granting rights to Monday Night Raw and SmackDown to Fox, each from late 2019 to late 2024, are now fully public without any redactions. Folks, this is the part where you as a wrestling fan rub your hands together and you're like, finally, we get to see if the speculations were right. If what we believed was true, and what kind of setups did WWE have with these media companies? Now, I'm not going to read the whole article because it is lengthy. There is a lot of stuff. Brendan, of course, goes crazy in depth. So I highly suggest going for it, right? Opening it up, reading. But I got the highlights. I'm going to break it down. We're going to talk about we're going to go through some of the big sticking points here, because this is the actual paper, right? These aren't reported numbers. These aren't guesstimates. Yeah, this is or projections, Brandon and Dave Meltzer, listening to the earnings calls every quarter and then listening to the returns and then deducing, well, because this show happened during this quarter and it happened in Saudi Arabia, then that means that this money over here changed here, and that means that the deal with Saudi Arabia is worth this much, type of thing. For the media deals, for the TV, we've got the numbers. Raw on USA came out to 1.325 billion over 5 years, averaging 265 million a year, escalating exactly 15 million annually. Now, to be clear, these media deals always pay more towards the back end of So the amounts always start smaller on first year, then you get a little bigger second, third, and keep moving. And with these escalations here of 15 million annually. SmackDown on Fox, that was worth 1.025 billion over 5 years, averaging 205 million per year, escalating 12.5 million annually. Both deals ran October 19 through September 2024, and it confirms with what Meltzer, Brandon, and others reported for years. But now we've got it with the appropriate exact math. Also included in the contract are the no compete clauses, and this was part of MLW's lawsuit with WWE. If you recall, right? MLW was trying to get a foot in the door, but WWE had all these clauses preventing any other pro wrestling to be broadcast on those networks. That's what they alleged, at the very least, in the lawsuit. We never got a full resolution to that because the lawsuit was settled outside of court. But we've got the paperwork now. NBCU agreed not to air any other wrestling on its cable networks. Carve-outs only for Lucha Libre or non-US wrestling, and that would only be on NBC Universal. Combate Americas was explicitly acknowledged as not being a competitor. Again, important for the Hispanic networks of NBCU. Fox had the same type of clause too. No promoting or advertising any non-WWE wrestling. They, however, had some carve-outs in the deal for MMA, amateur wrestling, like college wrestling, UFC, Bellator, those types of setups, and Glory as well. This is exactly what MLW. This is exactly what MLW alleged in its antitrust suit. And these clauses being public is, look, Court was right. Court Bauer was right. What do you want from me? Cord Bauer was right. And it also probably explains why MLW's Tubi deal got killed before it was even announced. It's all related. How much did they settle for? MLW, 20 million, something like that. I think it was 20 million. Digging into the contracts as well, we found out about that there's clauses regarding creative control and the partners. That's right. Creative control with the broadcast partners. WWE retained final creative control on both deals, both the NBCU deal and the Fox deal. NBCU had consultation rights, but couldn't override. All right, so they could pop in and here's some notes, but they couldn't override. Like they couldn't turn Raw into like they couldn't turn Raw into a SmackDown highlight show, for instance. That's stuff that couldn't happen. Fox, however, had a little extra something, had a little extra bit of spice here. WWE had to flag content that might damage Fox's relationship with its other sports partners, the NFL, NASCAR, Major League Baseball, so on and so forth. It had to flag content to Fox, and Fox would have a look at it and, look, essentially no shooting on Fox's other partners, basically. That was off limits to WWE. And there was no viewership benchmark tied to payments. So as long as new content kept being produced, the checks cleared, even if we were in the midst of the pandemic era and there was no one in the building. That had no incidence on the amount of money Fox was handing over. That's something that Brandon also had speculated on. So it confirmed that theory was correct. No viewership benchmarks tied to payments. Now, there was some promotional commitments that were asked by the partners as well. And Fox had some pretty hefty promotional commitments. And it's very interesting. Fox had to promote SmackDown like it promoted the NFL, NASCAR, and Major League Baseball. It had to, so that's why it was often included in these reads, during ball games, during sports games. That's because it was considered to be part of that environment. Crossover into Thursday night football slots, Sunday NFL games, college football, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, college basketball. SmackDown had to be promoted in that aspect. WWE talent had to appear on Fox reality shows, on scripted shows, on Fox News, on sports studios. That was part of the deal. Fox had to spend a minimum $20 million a year in promo value, right? $125 million minimum over the term, separate from the rights fees. So when we say had to pay, when we say like $20 million a year in value, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were paying WWE. It's more like the exposure that they were given had to be equal to $20 million a year. And there had to be a minimum of $125 million before the end of the term. So I would assume, and I don't know for sure, but via the language, I would assume that there wasn't any money being transacted. Like Fox wasn't really paying WWE for promotional for promo, or at least WWE wasn't paying Fox for promo. Fox was offering it up as value, as comps, essentially. And as a point of comparison, NBCU's commitments were a lot softer. Just like one annual, they call it Symphony cross promo commitment, and that was up to NBCU to determine. And Symphony is, from what I read, is kind of like the blanket term for creating synergy cross promotions within within the NBCU universe, I guess. They call it the Symphony. That doesn't matter. But coming back to Fox, all of the stuff that they had to do, as part of the contract, that's one thing. But there's stuff that Fox was contractually required to do and mostly didn't happen. So on top of let's run the list down of things that Fox was required to do but didn't happen. Such as a Saturday late night WWE show on Fox or FS1 entirely at the expense of Fox. That never happened. That never happened. So a show like what was the thing? WWE Backstage, is that the one that they used to do with Kyla Braxton and the two guys with Matt and the other dude, right? A show like that, but only produced by Fox. That never happened. A studio show on FS1 that became WWE Backstage. That's why I was talking. It debuted in October 2019. Did 597,000 viewers to begin with. Then did 426,000 viewers, but then never broke 200,000 viewers again and was dead by June 2020. Up to 4 pre-shows on Fox and FS1 before WrestleMania, the Royal Rumble, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series. They were supposed to air WWE pre-shows on pay-per-view dates for those 4 shows. Those never happened either. Saturday primetime live event specials, such as Saturday night's main event, but they didn't happen. However, there was a Tribute to the Troops show that happened in 2021 and the King of the Ring countdown specials as well. Both partners, before I go on, the question we might be asking ourselves is, why didn't they do most of this, right? Why didn't they do the Saturday night, late night WWE show? Why weren't there more Saturday primetime specials? Why wasn't any of this happening? I would argue that at some point, this relationship soured tremendously and Fox was very disappointed with the performances. And they probably had a couple of renegotiations and they probably had some tense conversations where it's like, look, we're not able to sell our ad inventory at the price that we want because your audience sucks. So we're kind of stuck here. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. Your pay-per-view pre-shows, we're not doing that. The Saturday night show, forget about it. We're not doing that. And WWE kind of had to maybe acquiesce to their demands or whatnot. I think all these things not happening are symptoms of a relationship that really didn't turn out to be as good as anyone thought it would be, essentially. All right, so both partners got to rerun, to re-air basically their content and the YouTube clips. So both NBCU and Fox got rerun windows on Spanish, on their Spanish language sister channels and on FS1 and FS2 as well. They couldn't re-air against Raw, SmackDown, or Sunday night primetime pay-per-views, of course. Raw clips starting at midnight after the broadcast. The partners could put a maximum of 50% of the entire episode online, and 80% of the clips had to be under 3 minutes. So that's very interesting. That's for Raw. And for SmackDown, clips before 10 p.m. couldn't exceed 1 minute. After the show, you got the same rule that they had for Raw, same 50, 80% under 3 minutes rule. That's very interesting. Fox had broadcast exclusivity, so it was exclusive over-the-air WWE partner, explicitly preventing Raw on NBC. So Fox kept Raw or potentially kept Raw off of NBC because they were the only ones that could do over-the-air. Spanish language Raw replays were carved out but never used. And so that explains why, Saturday night's main event and on NBC and NXT on CW only became possible once the Fox deal was done. And that's crazy. Like that's the gist of it. There's more really interesting stuff here. There, especially when it comes to the contract renewals and whatnot. But this is it's a very, very fascinating snapshot as to how WWE operates and what it demands from its partners. I was kind of floored with the amount of promotion that it required, particularly from Fox. I thought it was a little heavy-handed, quite honestly. But Fox, the one takeaway that I have here is that Fox didn't do the majority of what they were into, or what they were contracted to do, I should say. And that's probably because the relationship had already started to sour. Because they probably already were like, yeah, you know what, this is not working out. So no, we're not doing this show. We're not doing this stuff. We're not doing that. Until you start getting, until we're capable of getting rid of our inventory at the price we want, then you guys can continue doing your thing. And we'll talk about you on, college football, and that'll be that. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating look. And then it makes you wonder, what kind of contracts does AEW have and how similar in structure are they? It makes you think of a lot of stuff. But again, if you want to get into the nitty gritty a lot more, just head on over to WrestleNomics and read Brandon's article. It's fantastic. He breaks down everything in a lot of detail. Look, it is a very substantial article. Look at all that text. You're going to do a lot of reading, folks. But it's fascinating. I think it's very, 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 very fascinating, and you should give it a shot. But WWE apparently has been copyright striking tons of content creators online. So let's read this article here. Like everything in the world these days, professional wrestling has spawned a cottage industry of streamers and content creators who post videos of their reactions online, but WWE is looking to shut many of these posters down. A report by Jeremy Lambert at Fightful.com says WWE and its legal team have been going after a variety of online personalities. Quote, World Wrestling Entertainment has reportedly taken down and sent copyright strikes to a number of streamers and content creators over clips and reactions, unquote. That's from the report written by Jeremy Lambert. Fightful is also reporting that WWE is working with a company called Stream Enforcement, all one word, capital E in the middle. I hate that so much. That is so 2009. Anyway, using bots to target streamers. Our own Brian Alvarez confirms that WWE, quote, totally clamped down this week, unquote. And he continues, it's a lot of WWE reaction video creators, Alvarez reports, went down sometime in the past 3 weeks, big names all dinged and having to pull all their stuff, unquote. This is surprising because WWE has a track record of posting those streamers on their own programming. Really? Now, admittedly, I haven't watched WWE in a while. Have reaction streamers been a part of WWE programming? Because IShowSpeed is not a WWE streamer. And neither is Logan Paul. And neither was KSI. So I don't know. I'm curious. Did they show off, who's that guy? The other guy, Mr. Santi Zap? Did they put guys like that on? Anyway, a lot of people shocked about it, including in WWE, because those vids did push the product hard to large audiences, Alvarez said. And then there's an example of WWE promoting streamers on their own platform. Nearly a full minute of streamers reacting to Tiffany Stratton cashing in her Money in the Bank briefcase last year. Now I see I see what they mean now. I thought they were like featuring these streamers, like bringing in, I love Roman Reigns 73, whatever, and bring them on. That okay. It's not that. It's more like compilation streams. They just grab stuff and slap it all together, and then the content creator goes, "Hey, I was on there," but there's no way to identify them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Why am I talking about this? Why? Obviously, this is not something that concerns me. I don't play clips. I don't do reaction streams. I don't do this kind of stuff with WWE content or any content. When we do, on the rare occasions that we do watch-alongs, there's no video, there's no audio. I have played WWE Twitter videos in the past and got those, demonetized, and I've never been copyright claimed because that's not what I do here. We don't take the intellectual property that is WWE and go ahead and use it. I think that especially considering that you can make a discussion of in regards to WWE being some sort of sport, even though it is scripted, even though it is sports entertainment, it is still a sport. And I think there's a very easy case for fair use here to be put to task here, where essentially, if you're airing clips to highlight a point, to create to highlight a point, to create something new out of it, to bring something to the public's attention, I think that's absolutely fine and should be normalized. I think what WWE is doing is, I think it's terrible. I think it's wrong. But I also am pretty sure that there are content creators out there that are just very happy running, 10-minute clips or probably even entire matches of WWE stuff and, not really adding anything, just letting it roll, because to me, sitting around watching a clip and going, oh, that's not adding. That's not transformative. That's the word I was looking for earlier. It's not transformative. You're not changing the existing work into something different. You're just, layering something that just adds nothing, right? And I'm sure that there's a lot of these content creators that do that, these reaction streamers or reaction TikTokers or whatever the fuck. I'm sure there's a lot of them who do exactly that. So, it's low effort. It is what it is. I don't necessarily am shedding a tear necessarily, because I also think this content poisons pro wrestling at the same time, because it's, I don't think, I don't think it helps in the consumption of how pro wrestling should be thought about. But look, that's just me, right? I mean, look, if you've got reaction streamers that you really enjoy, and I'm sure out there are some who do a really good job that are legitimately entertaining. I mean, that's fine, and please go enjoy what you want to enjoy. I'm just talking, from my perspective here. But then again, like, Warren, why are you talking about it then? Are you just want to dunk on these people that are losing their channels? And no, of course not. Of course not. That's awful. No one should lose their YouTube channels, especially if you worked hard to build a following, to build a community. Absolutely not. Like, this kind of stuff is, in my opinion, is in my opinion, is abusive from WWE. This is abusive and they shouldn't be doing that. But the reason I'm talking about this is because I think this is all tied in to their plans, they being the Fed. I think this is all tied into their plans for WWE Club. I think because they are money grubbers and because they want not just a lot of money, they want all the money. They don't give a fuck, and they're going to crack down as hard as they can on these reaction streamers, on the possibility of flipping open a couple of TikTok accounts or YouTube accounts to see people react to these clips and whatnot. They're going to shut down that as much as possible so that it becomes more and more rare. And so if you want to be able to see these clips, you want to be able to enjoy this content, you will have to subscribe to the WWE Club. And I pulled this up here. And I think this spells a little more danger for wrestling, for a lot of wrestling websites, not just creators. Anyway, let's read through this. The announcement of WWE Gold Club WWE Gold membership experience, right? You can join this right now. Let's read the press release. WWE has announced the launch of Club WWE, the ultimate insider membership program. This is a very important keyword. That's a very important keyword there. The ultimate insider membership program designed to bring fans closer to WWE than ever before through exclusive access, rewards, and experiences. Club WWE will serve as a dedicated destination for WWE fans, offering a wide host of benefits across ticketing, merchandise, community, and content, all in one place. Fans interested in becoming a founding member can join the wait list now by visiting the URL. For an annual membership fee, Club WWE members will unlock a range of premium benefits, including exclusive 24-hour ticket pre-sale access to all WWE events across the world and tailored perks at featured events, including superstar meet and greets, hospitality opportunities, and entrances. Members only WWE shop featuring exclusive collections and early access to merchandise drops like John Cena's upcoming Never Seen 17 collection. That sounds sad. It sounds like anyway. Bonus WWE content featuring inside scoops, extended cuts, behind the scenes footage, and more. Dedicated members only community forum connecting fans around the world like never before. Listen, this is the main positive right here. This is the main positive, because if this means that we're going that WWE fans are going to have their own gated little environment that they can just like leave us all alone on social media, I'm completely fine with this. Let the WWE adults have their corner off the on the internet, but just leave the rest of us the fuck alone. Points-based reward system allowing fans to earn credits to redeem against digital and physical goods, and a premium welcome pack for founding members. Our fans are the heartbeat of WWE. Okay, who cares? The rest doesn't matter. It's all fluff. It's a quote from Cena, a meaningful way to engage. Blee, blah, bloop. So what's interesting here, and this is what I want to make sure I communicate this correctly here. They're essentially creating their own, in other words, right, their own Patreon. And yes, it's like AMC stubs. Like it's exactly the same type of situation, but they're creating their own Patreon here, for lack of a better term, where they're going to give all these exclusives if you pay a monthly fee for them, on top of the content that they already deliver for Netflix and NBC and ESPN and whatnot. And on top of all of that, you get this as well. Chat, don't you think it's curious that this gets announced and that they have this section right here, this part right here, dedicated, one of the perks of Club WWE Club, being bonus content featuring inside scoops, extended cuts, and behind the scenes footage and more. Don't you think that's interesting that in this environment right now where they're going around shutting people down, that they're like, oh yeah, no, hey, we're going to have some extended cuts. We're going to have some footage that, you won't be able to see anywhere else. It'll be with us. It's all going to be centered around us. Do you think that this is coincidental? Do you think, it could be, but I have trouble believing that this is coincidental. I have trouble believing that WWE is ruining an ecosystem to not be able to benefit from it. And we're talking about we've been talking, I should say, about reaction streams and reaction streamers and whatnot. But for me, I see danger signs for the scoopsters, for the news sites, for the people who break the news, the observers and the Fightfuls and so on. I see potential trouble on that end when it comes to their WWE scoops. There's a thing about featuring inside scoops. Like, of course, they're not going to be like real scoops. There's not going to be any real dirt. But for those of us who are old enough to remember the old Ross report back in the day on WWE.com, sometimes Jim Ross would drop some stuff. You're like, Jim, should you be telling us this? Jim, is this legit? Is this a real thing that you should? Well, it's legit, but should you be sharing this information? They've done it before in a way to sort of counteract the scoopsters, the dirt sheets back in the day. This was the reason, right? It's and JR already having credibility with the audience was an easy guy to turn around and say was an easy guy to turn around and put at the forefront here and say, no, like JR's good. He's a straight shooter. He's going to tell you everything. He's going to tell you everything that you need to know. And Livewire is a great example. Thank you, chat. Livewire is an excellent example on top of that. So without really giving some true to form dirt, okay, Becky Lynch and Charlotte Flair, they really fucking hate each other, not that. Give scoops on injuries and stuff like that, just like they used to do. They could do that. They could absolutely do that. Do you think that WWE, think about this for a second, do you think that they sit back and watch, the amount of people subscribed to The Observer, although we don't know exactly how many people, but, and the number of people, signed up to Fightful Select? Do you think they look at that and they go, good for them? Good for them. No, they don't. They go, well, where's our part of this money? This is money we could be making. I personally, at first, I thought the Club WWE Club, whatever the fuck it's going to be called, Club WWE, I thought it was going to be just like the first couple of the first couple of bullet points here. I thought it was going to be like, early access to merch and to ticket sales and, that kind of bullshit. And I was like, who's going to pay for that? But then premium content. And then I'm wondering, well, are they going to bring on a couple of these reaction streamers? WWE loves to do things in-house. They always have. They really hate using, they've tried to do the thing on Twitch, right? They tried to do the watch-along parties on Twitch. That failed. They never followed up with that. They've always tried to do things on the social media stuff, trust me when I tell you that when they put like NXT shows and AAA shows on YouTube, that is, they're doing it, they're doing it with clenched teeth. They're not enjoying any second of it. They don't want to do that. They want to be able to do things their own way. So, and on top of that, their own message board sounds a lot to me like a news site setup. And in the environment we're in right now, as far as wrestling media goes, with the amount of distrust that exists towards Dave Meltzer, Sean Ross Sapp, who are arguably the figureheads of wrestling media, and if you count everything that happened over the past couple of days with a certain outlet that will not be named, there's so much distrust towards wrestling media that they are in a perfect position to launch this kind of thing. And listen, you're going to get the real news here. You're going to get it from people you trust, us. You trust us. We're the people who provide you with entertainment. So of course we're on your side. We're not the dirt sheets. We're not the guy who talks to the janitor working at Titan Towers. That's not us. No one in WWE said Mabel was the third man. So you can absolutely trust us. You see what I'm getting at? To me, this is more of a move to horn in on other people's rackets. And I wouldn't be surprised in the least if some outlets just get less coverage. That suddenly the scoops slowly dry up. And I'm not saying within a month of the launch of Club WW. I'm talking, down the line a little bit. Just like, and I'm saying this, just like WWE can launch this thing and then completely abandon it within a month, right? Remember NFT moonsaults? Moonsault NFT, right? You see what WWE can just try something out and then press the eject button whenever they want. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised that the only scoopsters who continue to get the scoops from WWE are those who played ball, those who are good little mouthpieces for WWE, right? Like Front Office Sports. And isn't it interesting that WWE enters media partnerships like that and allows and not allows, but makes noise around these partnerships with outlets, basically saying, yeah, we've co-opted this outlet. And Mike Johnson over at PW Insider, I'm sure he'll continue to do his scoops. He'd bend over backwards for WWE. He'd do anything that WWE asks him to do. They sends him a little press release, and he'll never ask questions, and he'll never hit back. He'll never do a follow-up question. He'll just post the little blurb that he got like a good little boy, so he can keep getting his little scoopy doops. He'll be fine. And by the way, take a cheap shot once in a while against AEW and Tony Khan, courtesy of Dave Scherer. I think PW Insider is going to be fine. What about Dave? Well, Dave is different because Dave has long-term relationships in the business, so it might be a little different. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they start hanging on to this much more than they did in the past. And I think this is absolutely related to the creation of Club WWE. I'm 100% convinced that all of the copyright takedowns that they've been filing is all related to this. And I wouldn't even be surprised if a couple of big time streaming, and I don't know who they are. I have no idea who they are, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's exclusive, live streams that happen with these people, but via the Club WWE thing. Just some thoughts, just some random thoughts. But I really think that this has the potential to. I don't think any of these moves that they've been doing, WWE in the capacity of creating community online and centralizing things on their side, I don't think none of this is accidental. That's just not how they operate. There's always a reason for doing these things. So So they're going around and they're striking down channels. They're eliminating more goodwill. It doesn't matter. There will be people who are going to sign up to the club WWE to get a chance to get early access to spend a lot of money on tickets. And they'll have their little clubs and whatnot. And I'm sure they'll develop some kind of programming for their platform that will entice people to join. That would be my guess. And in the meantime, if they completely destroyed an ecosystem of people sharing clips and whatnot online, well, that's, as long as they keep making money, they don't give a shit. I think it's wrong, despite the fact that I don't like WWE. I don't like their business practices. I don't watch the show. Despite that, I think it's wrong, and they shouldn't be doing that. They should be celebrating their fans as opposed to trying to shut them down, especially on extremely shaky ground, because I would assume that there is a quantity of these people getting struck that are using the footage in a very fair use capacity. And I'm sure a lot of them are not. That being said. But ultimately, what you're doing is you're shooting down your biggest fans, which are the people who will create content because they love your content so much that they're gonna buy tickets to go to the show so that they can take pictures and videos of themselves at the show and do live streams, IRL streams. They're gonna want to do the meet and greet so that they can get video of them talking to Liv Morgan or whatever the fuck. Like, you're shooting those people in the foot, and that's dumb. But they're assuming that they can make a whole bunch of money with Club WWE. That's what they're banking on. And if it works, well, they'll have proven right. If they don't, well, we'll have to see. But those are just a few thoughts I wanted to throw out there. Don't couch it. Reaction streams are the lowest form of content and is only fair use in the most extreme examples. Look, I'm not necessarily a fan. I have a tendency to agree. Like, it's low effort content. I don't want to give the impression, because here's the thing. Like, when you're someone who does the streams, who does the YouTube, and you start talking about, oh, well, this other guy's content is so low effort, right? It's like what I'm doing is not exactly like challenging, either. It's, what do I do? However, I prepare, I get my notes ready, I get the articles ready, I formulate opinions, and I try to transfer those opinions, communicate those opinions as well as I can. But I mean, I'm not making this huge edited video with tremendous effects and, mind-boggling transitions and, incredible narration. I'm just, stammering across a microphone. So, I find myself, while I agree that reaction streams are the lowest form of content, I also tread lightly because what I do is not exactly the hardest thing on earth. Like, it's not the hardest thing to do ever. I'm not like, I'm not putting all of my cinematography skills to good use here. I've just got a couple of things running. I've got software running. I just press a couple of buttons and I'm online. Like, this is, so that's why, I tread lightly. I don't want to, go around telling people, go around and tell people, well, this content is low, is so low effort and it stinks, when you can absolutely look at what I do from a distance and go, well, your stuff is pretty low effort as well. And I'm like, well, you're not entirely wrong. You're not entirely wrong. But I don't like reaction content. I don't consume that stuff. I think it's lame. And that about does it for another edition of the Mr. Warren Hayes Show. Thank you all very much for showing up once again this week. If it's your first time here, consider subscribing or following, wherever it is you're watching, and leave a like, a 5-star review, a 5-star rating, and all that stuff. I will be back tomorrow, Thursday, with another edition of the AEW Dynamite Review, the best damn AEW Dynamite review in the game. And then later on the same evening for a live stream. I live stream Thursdays, Mondays. So tomorrow, Thursday, it's going to happen. And if you want to come and hop in and say hello and join us for a bit, you'd be more than welcome. It's a nice time. We have good times on stream. So we'll wrap it up on that. Thank you everyone for being here, and I'll see you next time.